So, good morning, everyone. I forgot, because I usually just do regular Zoom meetings, that we wouldn't be able to see all of the attendees in webinar mode. So, my bad, but I am so glad that you're here. We are so stoked to have you. My name is Pixie Popwell. I use they, they pronouns, and I'm honored to serve as your facilitator for today's research symposium. It is hosted by the Omicron Epsilon Chapter of the Phi Alpha Honor Society that's at the University of Southern California. We're really excited to connect with community to explore the social work dreamscape, reimagining the future of social work together, which means is actually being led by community members, undergraduate students, graduate students, doctoral students, and faculty. So as we begin, I would like to invite you to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Please share your name, your pronouns, the school or organization you're affiliated with, if any, and where you're joining us from today. While you are doing that, I would love to give a disclaimer. You might have seen some little heads bobbing over here. I have two beautiful chaos demons that are under the age of 4 that may join us periodically, or you might hear them in the background. Hopefully I'll be on mute for when they are. But I like to give that disclaimer. So yeah, would love to, thanks, Devin. But yeah, would love to see where everybody is coming from. Oh, well, just kidding. Oh, it just appeared. Okay, just kidding. Thanks, Kate. Glad that the chat is working, and also glad that the Q&A feature is working. We got some West Coast, East Coast. I know we've got folks internationally as well. Amazing. Love it. Well, keep putting it in the chat, and then as we move forward, I'll keep following and uplifting. Oh, and then walking us through a little bit of what the overview of our time today will be. So we're actually going to start off with 3 sessions of 2 presentations each. After each session grouping, there will be a shared Q&A opportunity so each presentation, except for our beautiful poster presentations, are about 15 minutes each, and then they share a 5-minute Q&A. After this grouping of sessions, we'll have a 10-minute intermission. Oh, the chat isn't working for folks. I'll pause for a second, see if I can make it work. Devin, do you see any controls on yours because it says that the chat is enabled, but it's not looking like it lets folks.
Yeah, let me go on the back end on Zoom
Okay.
and see if there's anything I can do. Give me a second.
Okay, no worries. You know, even when you practice things, y'all, it's gotta keep us on our toes. Well, thank you for trying. I appreciate y'all trying to participate. And I am glad you were here regardless, and hopefully we can fix that before we get too far into the Q&A. Just kind of continue to go through our agenda. So once we come back from that 10-minute intermission, we will be wowed by 7 more presentations across 3 session groupings, additionally with those Q&As. And then we will close out our time together with a reflection question. And again, hopefully the chat works at that point. But before we get fully started, I believe that it's important and grounding to know the expectations of a space. For our time together, we'll hold a few community agreements. This is a virtual learning space, so please feel free to participate in ways that feel supportive to you or that the virtual platform allows you to. This also includes panelists. If your camera use is optional unless you're presenting, we welcome you to engage through the Q&A feature until the chat is unlocked. Some of today's topics may feel intellectually challenging or emotionally activating, so we encourage you to take care of yourself. Step away if needed, stretch, hydrate, and return when you're ready. Take care of these adult meat suits as you need to. My role today is to move us through our shared time together. Presenter bios are going to be available on the screen and will be in the symposium materials. And each presenter will briefly introduce themselves during their presentation. We are deeply grateful to each of you for being here and contributing to this shared learning space. I'm going to drop in the chat since y'all can see it. Oh, hey, it works now. Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Kate.
Did it work?
Yeah, it did.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful. Okay. So the first link that I am dropping in the chat is the agenda, just so that you can always have it for today. And the second link is the link to the slide deck. It will be on the screen, but that way, if you would like the takeaway now, you can have it. So without further ado, I'm excited for us to get started with our first presenter. Shantice, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so hi everybody. My name is Shantice Wright. I'm very excited to be here with you all today, especially to be kicking off our time together as the first presenter. So a little bit about myself before we begin. I am a DSW Human Rights Leadership candidate at Monmouth University in New Jersey. My final defense is in 2 weeks, so please send good vibes my way and wish me luck. I am the secretary of Phi Alpha's Epsilon Chapter at Monmouth University. This is my second and last year as a secretary, so it's been a great experience. I obtained my master's in social work from Monmouth University and my master's in public administration from Rutgers University in Newark, New Jersey. About a year ago, it'll be a year in April, I started Right Holistic Realms LLC, and that is a business that I have dedicated to helping the helpers. So today I'm here to talk about something very near and dear to my heart. Holistic health and social work practices are the foundation of both my professional and personal lifestyle, and I'm very excited to be sharing my passion with you all. So thank you for being here. So we're going to start with a short grounding exercise. I'll tell you what my story is and what brought me here today. We'll talk about burnout and how we can recognize burnout. I'll be discussing the similarities and differences between social work and holistic health, mostly how I combine the two differences in my daily work. I'll then cover intersectional feminist theory, which is the theoretical framework of my recent research project. I'll be discussing cultural competence and cultural humility. And most importantly, we'll talk about protecting our peace because that's something that I live by every day. And then we'll finish with some affirmations. So box breathing has been in my practice for a while, but it's also been in practice across many different cultures for decades, even before I was born. Most notably, it's been utilized by Navy SEALs as a grounding technique during high pressure scenarios. Personally, I practice box breathing whenever I'm feeling anxious or triggered. I also do a few rounds of box breathing before I go to bed if I'm having a hard time falling asleep. So we're going to do one round of box breathing to get ourselves grounded and present, not only for the remainder of my presentation, but just for the remainder of our time together. So we're going to take a deep breath in and we're going to hold for 4 seconds. We're going to hold that breath for 4 seconds. We're going to breathe out for 4 seconds, and then we're going to hold our breaths again for another 4 seconds. So let's all try it together. Take a deep breath in for 4 seconds total. So hold, breathe out, and hold again. All right, so I'm hoping that you all feel present and centered, and let's move on. Okay, so what's my story and why did I just make y'all take a huge deep breath? I was born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey. I had a traditional upbringing in a two-parent household. I have an older brother. I'm a Black woman in her early 30s. My religion is Christian Baptist, and I'm heterosexual. My social work career began as a counselor at a reentry center in my hometown, and there I facilitated groups and I conducted intake assessments for the residents coming in. They were coming in from out of prison, from in prison, and they were working on transitioning back into society. After obtaining my MSW, I transitioned into child welfare, and there I did investigations regarding allegations of abuse and neglect against children, and I also worked as a permanency caseworker. From there, I transitioned into an institutional abuse investigator. So, same type of investigations, just at an institutional levels. So, in schools, daycares, residential treatment centers, on a larger scale. But when I started the DSW program 3 years ago, I shifted to working in IT for a bit because I really needed a break from that fast-paced community work. I didn't feel like I would be able to juggle both, so I decided to shift gears a little bit. But for the last year, I've been working as a child welfare quality assurance analyst. And in my current role, I assist frontline child welfare leadership, and we create data-driven improvement plans. And that's really to improve the case practice that the frontline workers are conducting with the children and families when they go out into the community. In addition to that, I've been a part of multiple wellness committees at work. I think workplace connectivity and safety, they are foundational and universal human rights that I value, and they also served as the framework to my research project. In addition to full-time work in school, I started a business, and that's really allowed me to add digital marketing to my wheelhouse. As the secretary, I'm in charge of the Instagram and LinkedIn pages for the Honor Society. So please make sure you follow us as well, Monmouth Phi Alpha. So I've also taught at the college level once, and I know that for a fact, like once I graduate, that's my ultimate passion and goal is to teach other prospective students coming in. Uh, Mostly what I wish I would have been taught when I was in MSW school, and just to give back to the new generation of scholars and professionals. I did recently pass my LSW exam in New Jersey, so there's a possibility that I may be dabbling in supervised clinical practice in the near future. The jury's still out on that, but we'll see. And most importantly, I'm passionate about teaching, learning, mentoring, wellness, and connecting with like-minded individuals. So I know I just told you a lot, and it wasn't just because I wanted you to know all about me. It was because the work that I've done in the past decade, there was one significant event that really made me who I am today. So back in 2019, I was essentially working myself to death. I was on autopilot. I was trying to achieve all of these goals that I had set up. And what ended up happening was I wasn't taking care of myself. So I ended up in a hospital. I had a life-threatening spinal infection. And although that was 6 years ago, I'm still dealing with the ramifications of that illness now. So I shared all of that information with you about my journal as about my journey as a reminder to all of you that we are not willing and able to help others if we're not taking care of ourselves first. And I had to really learn this the hard way. So now it's my mission to share my lesson that I learned with others so that they don't make the same mistakes that I made. And when you see everything that I've done here and you hear about all of my accomplishments, I just want you to remember that it came with a price that I shouldn't have had to make myself pay. So remember, please take care of yourselves first while you're achieving all of these goals so that you then can give back to others and it could be the best like your best self without having to burn yourself out. And we're going to talk about burnout in a little bit. So throughout the remainder of my presentation, you'll see check-in prompts in green. So please feel free to write those prompts down and answer them at your leisure. You can think of the answer after you see them, or you can simply write them down. for later reflections. So let's talk about firefighters. Who do we call when someone or something is on fire? Who do we call when our cats are stuck in a tree? Where might we take our kids for day trips when we're bored and we really don't feel like making up anything, any activities for them to keep them engaged? Who normally drives by our houses during the holiday season to spread extra joy when they're not busy saving lives? So we're talking about firefighters here. We rely on firefighters for a variety of services. But what happens when our firefighters don't replenish their own fire hydrants or use their own smoke detectors to measure whether the heat is too high for them? What happens when there isn't a fire extinguisher in sight for a firefighter who has hit their limit and is internally on fire? My point is, as helping professionals, we need to always take care of ourselves first before we can then help others put their own fires out. And if we don't do that, we end up burning out. So burnout manifests itself in many different ways. It could look like emotional exhaustion, feeling emotionally drained or numb to feeling anything, like such as empathy. You may be less empathetic because you're just too mentally tired to care. It can look like depersonalization, like personal detachments from our loved ones or detachments from activities that normally would bring us joy. We could have low self senses of accomplishment, feeling like we don't matter or feeling like we're not making a true difference in the world. So while the World Health Organization recognizes burnout as a phenomenon, it doesn't recognize it as an actual disease or illness. But as helping professionals, I think it's vital that we recognize the signs of burnout. So I want you to reflect on the last time you felt fully present and aligned with your purpose as a professional or even just in general. So here you can see the core values of both social work and holistic health as professions. And both professions view people as whole beings whose mental, physical, and social well-being are interconnected, and they both emphasize empowering individuals. However, there are some differences between the two disciplines. Social work focuses outward, like on systems, resources, advocacy, and really dismantling barriers for the underrepresented or marginalized communities. While holistic health focuses more inward on the body's healing capacity through nutrition, movement, stress management, and mind-body practices. But here's why they are powerful together as a discipline. You're not able to regulate your nervous system without having safe housing. And you can't really fight for justice for yourself or others when your body's physically feeling depleted. So, social work builds on that external platform that we need as individuals, while holistic health provides internal nourishment that we need to thrive. So, when we combine the two disciplines together, we're creating professionals who are resilient, who are reliable, who are healthy, who feel whole, and who are actually capable of helping other individuals. So, let's shift gears to intersectional feminist theory. In layman's terms, intersectional feminism is really understanding the various aspects of our identity, like our race, our age, gender, sexual orientation, and that these are all connected and shape the unique experiences of discrimination. So that's why I explained earlier, I'm Black, I'm in my 30s, I identify as heterosexual, I told you my religion. These are all the different layers within me that could shape the unique experiences that I experience on a daily basis. So because of this, social workers and other helping professionals must advocate for a more inclusive approach to gender equality. So specifically for my research project, I wanted to explore how intersectionality was intertwined in child welfare leadership and policy reform. But I also wanted to consider instances of burnout and compassion fatigue for frontline workers because they experience burnout on a day-to-day, and that could really impact case practice and also the outcomes for the children and families that we serve. So I want you to reflect on how intersectionality could be applied to improved outcomes for individuals, especially and most importantly, those who are from marginalized communities. So cultural competence is like building a toolkit where you learn specific skills and knowledge to interact with different cultures or even within our own culture. However, cultural humility is more of an ongoing journey. It encourages you to keep an open mind, to reflect on your biases, and to continuously learn from others. So, while cultural competence aims for enhancing our knowledge about multiple cultures, cultural humility focuses on us embracing that lifelong learning process. And we're also going to be recognizing power dynamics to foster genuine relationships with other people. So both approaches ultimately enhance empathy and communication, and they also help us connect better in this diverse world that we live in. So as you reflect on your downtime, think about the differences between the two and how both can be integrated into your daily interactions with others, whether it's in your personal life or in your professional life. So most importantly, make sure you pause before you pour. It's 100% okay for you to set boundaries, no matter what setting you're in. I want you to always remember that no is a full sentence and it's nothing to feel guilty about saying. You do not have to explain yourself. If you want to say no to somebody, that's it. That should be the end of it. And you should not have to feel guilty about saying no. Energy check-ins can really help us stay grounded. So make sure you're starting your day with asking yourself how you feel in the moment, because that feeling may set your mood and tone for that entire day. Like I stated before, I like to practice grounding exercises to keep myself present, but there are other holistic activities that you can engage in, such as journaling or somatic adjustments like yoga, deep breathing, and or just simply humming or singing to yourself. And if you need another reminder, no is a full sentence, period, exclamation point. So another activity that I love is affirmations. And I don't need y'all to come off of mute for this, but I do really want to see some lips moving as you repeat after me. I am whole. I am safe. I am enough, just as I am. Please feel free to follow me on social media at Right Holistic Realms LLC, or you can visit my business website. And my research projects findings are going to be housed on healingjustice.leadership.org. So you can visit that website to learn about the research that I conducted. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Shantice. I loved it and it was beautiful.
Thank you.
And I look forward to the Q&A shortly. Um, and now, moving from that kind of intentional insight and mindfulness, we can also navigate beautifully over to Gerald, who will talk about emotional skill building.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gerald Palmer, and I am coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri, Avila University, and we're going to talk about puppets, but not really puppets. I remember in 1979, I'm aging myself, my mother took me to the movies. It was a surprise visit, and she was a single mother, and we went to the movies, and my life changed. The movie was the Muppet movie. Oh my goodness, it was the Muppet movie. And from that day on, I have been in love with puppets and Muppets. And if you come into my office, you will see Muppets everywhere. So again, this presentation talks about puppets, but it's about preparation, specifically how we help social work students do the inner work of practicum readiness before they enter the field. I'm interested in emotional safety, reflective capacity, and professional readiness right before students um, enter practicum. So before they enter practicum and responsible for real client outcomes, we want to make sure that they are ready for the work. So let's talk about why this matters. So again, I am a assistant professor of social work at Avila University, but I'm also a director of practicum education. And when we talk about workforce sustainability, the thing is, it doesn't begin at hiring. It begins at practicum. So practicum is definitely high risk transition point where students manage their fear, their identity shift, and emotional exposure. And one of the things I hear students talk about is that they're scared. They're scared about practicum because they're scared to make mistakes. Um, and, and what I'm also finding is that some practicum agencies are expecting students to be, to hit the ground running as employees. But I assure students, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. I'll talk to the practicum supervisor, and this is a learning situation. So this work that we're doing, it focuses on preparation and not about measuring outcomes. So that word, pedagogy, that word always trips me up. What is this? So in pre-practicum courses, the course that we're implementing this work in is a intro to generalist social work. So in pre-practicum courses, students consistently name anxiety about mistakes. They talk about supervision and emotional reaction. And when we do traditional teaching, we we don't we don't talk about the implicit stuff. We don't talk about the unspoken fears. And we don't even get into the role of confusion. And I heard Shantice talk about the things that she wished that she would have learned before she entered the practice. And there were some things that I wish that I would have learned before I entered practice as a graduate of the university I'm teaching in. So students are often trying to look ready rather than exploring what they're actually carrying. So let's talk about the experiential foundations of this work. So we're talking about practice and preparation, and it requires reflecting, integrating, and trying again. It is also about making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And when we look at experiential learning, it supports rehearsal, reflection in action, and integration of skills, values, and judgment. So the question that I begin exploring is how do we create this environment, this learning environment, without raising emotional risk? So here's where the puppets come into place. So again, I love puppets. I love art. And I believe in when it comes to social work, be yourself. Bring yourself into the classroom. Bring yourself into practice. So we start looking at art-based pedagogy, and it extends experiential learning by lowering performance pressure. So when students do role plays, uh, a lot of times they bring their self, but using puppets, it increases psychological safety and allows access to concern students might not yet have language for. So critically, it allows engagement without forced disclosure. So why puppetry? So puppets puppets function here as an instructional design. And the cool part about this is students, I mean, you could do it different ways. They can create their own puppets or they could choose puppets. And so what we did is we purchased 15 animal puppets, from lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. So we got we have the puppets, and the students choose the puppets. So using the puppets, they externalize their roles. The puppets hold um, symbolism, and it creates reflective distance. So, using the puppets and their own voice, students can rehearse difficult conversations and experiment with professional voice safety. So often, what we found is that the puppet says what the students is still learning how to say. We used different role plays of critical issues that are happening in our country, issues in practice, and students were able to get through these by not seeing themselves, but using the puppet as an extension. And I'm going to tell you why this is very important as we go into something that I call social expense risk. So, social expense risk is used here as a pedagogical naming tool. It's practice informed naming tool, and it's not a theory. It helps students identify emotional strain, social pressure, and identity based tension likely to emerge in practicum. So when students when they go to their practicum, um, they are dealing with issues and concerns that impact their community. And many times in practice, as social workers, we take on the stressors of our community. And students also see this as well. We had students who were working at agencies that address immigration. And because of policies across our country, that organization felt the pressure. And the student doing their practicum also felt that pressure as well. And this is what we call social expense risk. And part of that is being able to identify what we bring with us. And that's what we call what's in my backpack. And so this symbolic activity, you see all the travel stuff, the things that we carry with us. The backpack represents everything that we bring with us, our race, our identity, our religion, our ability, our burdens, and how that is treated or how we are viewed based on how we show up and what we bring with our backpack. So the goal is not to solve everything. The goal is not resolution, but it's about making potential social expense risk discussable before it becomes overwhelming for students. So again, it's not about solving what we have, but it's about actually addressing and knowing what we are bringing with us as we go into practice. So let's talk about the lab, what we call the inner work puppetry lab. And this is something that we did last year. We took a total of it was an 18, I'm sorry, a 16-week class, and we spent the first 9 weeks of using puppets to actually practice skills, soft skills, as well as practice skills. And what happened was the students rotated roles, social worker, client via the puppet. So the client was always the puppet. And then there was also, I'm sorry, yeah, the puppet was always the client, and one student was the observer. And the activities followed by a structured reflection and journaling as well. And when students use the puppet, when you engage with the puppet, you talk to the puppet, not the student. And so one of the students talked about the challenge was looking into the cold, dead eyes of the puppet. And then eventually the puppet became alive and they were able to actually have that conversation. So based on the journals, at the end of that 16-week course, uh, these are some of the things that emerged. And so these are observations, not really outcome claims. Over time, students often show reduced performance anxiety. After that second week, students became more comfortable with the puppets even named, they gave the puppet's name, and we actually retired one of the puppets. And all the students in that class signed that puppet. But what we found is that there was clearer boundary language, and there was also a willingness to use supervision reflectively, because one of the things they practiced was how to use supervision effectively. So why? Why does this matter? Well, this matters for our profession because it normalizes the struggle before the field. We name things before students hit the field. It frames readiness as ethical preparation rather than emotional toughness. When we look at social expense risk, we don't just say, you know what, this is tough work. You might face burnout. We don't do that. Burnout, it shouldn't be one of the one of the goals of our profession. Actually, using these puppetry, using these skills, we help students navigate through those pitfalls. So again, this is about prevention. Okay, this is about prevention. And I'm seeing some of the things in the chat. Thank you so much. You're hyping me up. And so again, this is not an empirical study. These are no casual claims. This is one course, one context, and we're actually going to apply it to every intro to generalist course. And even now, that first group of students are wanting to use the puppets in our human behavior social environment courses as well. So again, this is practice informed scholarship. And that's why transparency matters. So let's ground it all together. Let's just as we end this. So this work again is grounded in experiential learning, art-based pe- pedagogy. Sorry, I stutter at times, and also reflective social work education. And it was created because again, wanted to make sure that students understand what they're getting into with practicum, but also that we prepare them. So in closing, I want to tell you that this teaching note offers it's low cost. Again, you could do it in 9 weeks, um, and you do it in 9 weeks. And I actually created a whole there's a whole workbook and all that, but it helps bridge classroom learning and field practice, and it contributes to how we think about workforce sustainability. So thank you, and of course, I welcome any questions.
Thank you so much, Gerald. I really appreciate you. And I'm just loving, we get to start out this way. So I would love to open it up for questions. I'm going to stop screen sharing so you can see the amazing humans that you're going to ask questions to. And you can use the chat or the Q&A feature. How about while we're waiting, I'll ask each of you a question while we get a chance to have it in there. So I'm gonna head back to Shantice. You discussed individual strategies for protecting peace and recognizing burnout. What structural or organizational changes are most necessary to make workforce wellness sustainable beyond that individual responsibility?
So, in my research, actually, one of the findings from my research was a complete revamp from the top down at the organizational level. So, oh, hi, Jamie. Oh my God, Jamie, one of my classmates. Sorry, y'all. But a top-down revamp, because a lot of the times in our organizations, whether state government, private, it's a very top-down heavy approach to delivering services, and that's not taking into account how staff are doing in general. So a lot of the times there's a disconnect between managers and lower level staff, especially frontline staff. A lot of the frontline workers feel unheard. So not only are they expected to go out there and do a bunch of work and bunch of documentation and community visits and also have to deal with the secondary trauma that they're experiencing. They don't have the support from upper management. There's a disconnect. And some of the upper management leadership have never been in the field a day in their lives. So they don't know what it feels like to have to work those late night hours and do all of that documentation and turn around and have to do it the next day as if nothing happened. So I think there needs to be a definite revamp from the top down and more of a bottom up approach to leadership and empowerment amongst the workforce in general. So I think that's how you start revamping out a lot of our self-helping or helping organizations that we have throughout the country, throughout the world.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I always appreciate the opportunity to expand on it because, implementation is its own thing. And that actually leads us into Gerald. Like, what does this look like in real time? Like within what was the institutional response to the proposal? What does implementation look like?
Yeah, the institutional response was a little bit of laughter. You're going to use puppets, but they were, my dean and my colleagues were on board. The looks I get when I'm walking down the hallway with a puppetry full of puppets, uh, it was really it was great. But the students were a little bit leery about using puppets. But when we put the clear boundaries, use your own voice and make sure you give eye contact to the puppets. It's something that has been embraced. I would say out of the 30 students, we have small classes. You might have two or three that were like, "Oh, this is weird," but eventually there was super buy-in, and the response outside of our institution has been really great too. So we're gonna keep on doing it and try to actually to apply it to more of our courses.
I love that. Thank you. Well, thank you both so much. This is great. What's a wonderful session to start the day off with. And I hope folks will reach out to them to hear more and make this national. I'm going to go ahead and screen share again. I always like to warn when I am taking over screens. Um, and so um, we are going to move over to and kick off the first of our two lightning round presentations. And so, Alexander, the Zoom screen is all yours.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alexander Swayze. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a junior here at Monmouth University. I'm coming to you today from the Bluffs, actually, if anybody knows where that is. So, my research is on addressing the gaps in men's mental health. And just as a quick disclaimer, my research focuses mainly on cisgender men across the globe. However, I believe this can be useful to anybody transitioning in or out of this sphere, as we'll get into a little bit in my hope section of the presentation. So, just starting off with some data. As you can see here, we have three big pieces, and with the first one being that almost one in 10 men in the United States experience depression or anxiety, but less than half receive treatment. That is a very important number because A, it shows just how many men may be suffering from this, and B, it also shows that because less than half receive treatment, these numbers could actually be much higher, and we just don't know it yet. So that kind of frames the whole presentation, as you'll see later. Men are also four times more likely to die by suicide than women. And this is an incredibly unfortunate statistic, as again, it reemphasizes the point of how prominent this problem is. While women's depression rates and suicidality rates may be higher than men's completed suicides tend to be much higher than women's. Um, yeah, and again, emphasizing this point. Men also generally have less healthy diets than women. They smoke more, drink more, engage in more risky practices, and underuse health services, as we saw with the statistic. And again, this all just kind of frames the problem that we're facing and the way that things go. So the challenge here is that many countries across the globe and many cultures across the globe underutilize their resources or maybe don't have the resources to help men in this sphere. So globally, since fewer than 10% of countries have transitioned to these like community-based care models, it still puts a lot of pressure on men to not seek help because when they do, it is often in the form of institutions or hospitals or things of that nature, which can be very challenging, very scary to go into because you feel like your freedom is taken away. However, in a community-based care model, it is it focuses on delivering services to one's own community and empowering them to keep living independently while receiving treatment. So community-based care model is very important because without it, um, are resorted to institutions and hospitals and things like that, which can be very harming for people. So as I said earlier, men are also less likely to seek help and report for mental health issues. And here's where some of my cultural research comes in. So in China, some of the only data I could find on men's mental health was that men who have sex with men have higher suicidality rates and mental illness rates. This is an incredibly important statistic, in my opinion, because it shows that unless you are already engaging in a quote unquote taboo practice in East Asian culture, then you are considered suffering and you're considered to be taken seriously in your mental health challenges. In Latino, Latinx, Hispanic cultures, mental illness is often stigmatized and ignored heavily, as it is often attributed to lack of faith, not praying enough, having demons in the body, or sinful behaviors of your parents. And again, that is an incredibly damaging mindset to many people who are suffering because they believe that they did something wrong or there's something wrong with them. And that's why they can't seek help. Because if they do, how are they going to be perceived? How is their family going to look at them? How are their friends going to look at them? And also for Black men, research has showed that when they do receive mental health services, it's often lesser in quality and accessibility than white counterparts. And again, this is important because it shows that while some people may be receiving treatment, it's often very low in quality. However, there is hope. And the hope here being that the use of education and role models and things like that are incredibly important. And you can read some of these quotes and statistics. But essentially, we need more talk. We need more education. We need more conversation and role models because that is what builds a foundation for change. And I know I'm a little bit over time, so I'm going to stop here. But yes, education, role models, and talking. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Alexander. I know that right, like 5 minutes goes really, really fast, and hopefully
Yeah,
we can extend a little bit more in the Q&A. Um,
yes.
awesome. So now we will switch over to Noreen. If you're ready.
Hi, yes, okay. Question, do I have control of my screen? Okay, got it. Sounds good.
Nope. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noreen. I am in my last year of my MSW program here at the University of Georgia. I am in Alpharetta, Georgia, joining from there today. And yeah, so today I'm going to talk about my preliminary study, which is titled Components and Characteristics of Culturally Competent Mental Health Services for First Generation Young South Asian Immigrants. This, I realize, is a very big mouthful of words. So a few definitions. What is an immigrant? An immigrant is someone who comes from another country to another country that's not of their origin to live there permanently. And then first generation basically means that this is the first person in their generation, their familial generation, to do this. And then when I say young, I mean ages 18 to 30, so a young adult, South Asian immigrant. And then South Asian is just all of the countries in the geographical South Asian region. So a bit of background on my research. The reason why I wanted to do it on young adults is because this is a pretty critical developmental period that I think a lot of people overlook. You're going through career changes, you're going through educational changes, you're kind of finding out who you are. But now you have this situation where someone is immigrating and they have that added stress and relating to a new country to go along with that. And then for South Asians specifically, this is a collectivist culture. So this is happening in a context where it is not the norm to seek help. Really, resilience is preferred, deal with it on your own or find some spiritual way, outlook to deal with it. That's preferred. And then family-centered values kind of makes it hard to see yourself as one person who has this individual distress that they're going through because everything is so heavily community based in these cultures. But saying that, obviously, South Asians are not a monolith. They all have their own cultures and unique subcultures. So I'm not trying to generalize the entire continent, but this is a lot of the things that mental health professionals kind of see when they see South Asian immigrants in general. And then my last point is that mental health systems in the US are usually based on Western individualistic models, and they don't really account for the nuances in collectivist cultures in general. So taking that into account and going into my study, my research question was kind of seeing the clinician's point of view, so fully licensed mental health clinicians from a diversity of licensures with a minimum of one experience working with first generation South Asian clients. Since this is a preliminary study, I only had three because we're just kind of trying to read the landscape, see what's out there, and just kind of see how they conceptualize culturally competent care for these clients. Now, going into the interview, I realize I'm zooming through this, sorry, but going into the interview, I had five questions that I really wanted to ask them to kind of get a feel for what is going on. And so that was, what is the mental health needs from the general South Asian population? What do you normally see them for? Is there a difference in the issues they seek help for versus other clients? What are the challenges they face in accessing services? Is there any difference between the first generation and the second generation that was more so born and raised here? And then were you prepared to take on those challenges? And then what we found was that yes, there are some differences between first gen young South Asian clients and the second generation. And what we're seeing with the first gen is a lot of acculturative stress, adjusting to US systems such as universities and healthcare systems, and then immigration related challenges like survival stress. Whereas second gen is more of their own personal identity conflict, bicultural stress, and intergenerational tension. So moving forward to the future and actual implications, what our findings kind of tell us is that there is a need for immigrant-informed, culturally responsive mental health care that takes clients' specific migration histories and really the nuances that might come with that into account. And we really can't do that until we have more informed supervision on how to approach those challenges. And that is all.
Amazing, amazing job. All right, I'm gonna do my stop the screen share so we can see you. Boop, boop. There we are. Um, so I wasn't kidding when those were lightning talks. They both did amazing about summarizing a whole crap ton of work in 2.7 seconds. Again, if folks have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A feature. And while we wait for those, Alexander, I was wondering, in focusing on cisgender men's mental health, how do you see social work balance, navigating the balance between addressing privilege and addressing vulnerability?
Mhm. So I think this is actually a really important question and something that I've talked about a lot with my colleagues. Um, While cisgender men do tend to have a lot of privilege given the systems and structures that are in place in the world, there is also a lot of vulnerability because of the fact that they are seen as having all of this power or all of this privilege. So there is no room for error. There's no room to be struggling. There's no room for any of this. So if you are seen as struggling, then like I kind of mentioned earlier, you're seen as less of a man, you're seen as less of a human, You're seen as someone who, as I'm sure many men have heard in their lives, isn't a real man because you're struggling. And the reason I believe that people are so critical and say these things is because men do inherently have a lot of privilege and power that tends to overshadow what they may be going through. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And yeah, so th it's not always as clear cut as it seems, is my basic answer.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Um, Noreen, what like risks exist when Western mental health paradigms are exported into immigrant community context without any adaptation?
I think when I look at it from a therapeutic relationship perspective, like between, you and your counselor, there is a really great possibility that the erosion of trust just kind of disappears when you don't like account for that. And then you have someone who is like supposed to be helping you, and then it kind of turns into them doing the opposite where they're overlooking structural stressors like immigrant trauma, visa instability, even like, can I talk to them about my racist experiences here as an immigrant? Will they even take that seriously? And what that can lead to is like contributing to the psychological distress that they're already in. They can lead to them dropping out from services, lead to a crisis situation, and just not really be helpful in the end.
Thank you. Amazing. Well, I'm going to give y'all some breathing room. Again, folks, like definitely reach out to, especially these two that didn't get to dive more in because this is a lot of work. And I also want to emphasize, kind of as we did in our one-on-one, Noreen, is that three is still three more than a lot of voices get uplifted. So you are doing amazing and important work. And thank you for sharing it with us today. Oh, back the screen share. Boop, boop. Awesome. So now, we'll take 30 seconds and breathe. And then also, because we're going to be shifting to like systems reform, and we're going to start that out with Arthur. So whenever you're ready, you let me know.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arthur Augustine. I'm a student of a Master of Social Work candidate and DSW applicant for fall 2026 at USC Susan Dworak-Peck's, I could never pronounce this, School of Social, specializing in adult mental health and integrated care. As a formerly incarcerated scholar practitioner, I draw on my lived experience to develop and advance systems level solutions for justice impacted populations. I'm also the founder of the Life for Soul Foundation and the developer of the Freedom Village model, regenerative reentry framework that integrates housing, behavioral health, workforce development, and economic empowerment. My work bridges a clinical practice, community-based intervention, and implementation science. I'm committed to transforming reentry into a pathway for long-term stability, dignity, and collective advancement. So let's begin. The quote on this slide is the heart of this work. Don't give me a fish to feed me for tonight. Show me how to fish so I will never hunger again. Teach me how to build a home so I will never be homeless. I'm not here to present a theory. I'm here because I know the mechanics of abandonment. I lived it. You can't case manage your way out of survival. You have to build a different world around it. Freedom Village is that world, and this is its blueprint. Okay. Tonight, someone will be released from prison. They leave with $200 in gate money and 72 hours to find housing. That is not a second chance. That's a setup for failure. People coming home are 10 times more likely to be homeless. The question was never, and then most are rearrested within 3 years. The question was never whether they could succeed. The question is whether we gave them the conditions to. The system is producing the very result it claims to prevent. That is exactly what we have to change. $121 billion spent annually on incarceration. $121 billion. That is $1.82 trillion over the next decade. That is enough to end homelessness in America twice over. We're not lacking resources. We're mismanaging them. We chose cages instead of communities. 82% of are rearrested within 10 years. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. Freedom Village is the structural answer to a structural failure. So what is Freedom Village? It's not a shelter, not a 90-day program. Freedom Village is a permanent community built by the people who live in it. 4 pillars, and they work as an ecosystem. One, regenerative housing. Residents build their own permanent homes. Real stability, real belonging. Workforce and economic mobility. Site labor becomes union credentials and home ownership. A real pathway. And then integrated behavioral health. On-site care. No wait lists. MC trained crisis teams and restorative justice circles replace police response with clinical accountability. And lastly, regenerative agriculture, healing the soil while sustaining the community. Housing enables work, work funds recovery, recovery sustains the land, and the land sustains all of it. I did a 12-week dive into a permaculture training here in Culver City. And it wasn't just training, it was a personal healing for me. This isn't out there, it's a lived reality. I'm speaking from my experience. You cannot incarcerate a person's relationship with yours. Reclaiming that connection is reclaiming the self. Therapy, horticultural therapy, is an evidence-based, proven to reduce anxiety and recidivism. Enterprise, on-site gardens and CSA subscriptions build a self-sustaining economy, reducing system dependency. Dignity, growing food for neighbors shifts person's identity from formerly incarcerated to provider. That change is permanent. So who are we building this for? Someone like Marcus, someone like Devin. Marcus served 11 years, released with $200, no support network, no waiting, no one waiting for him. Back in 6 months, not because he's failed, but because the system handed him nothing to hold on to. Devin, on the other hand, aged out of foster care into the highest risk window there is, the transitional age adolescent youth, ages 18 to 25, when young people are most vulnerable to homelessness and justice involvement. He's been turned away from every system designed to help him, invisible by design. Excuse me. Freedom Village is where their paths intersect. Marcus, with his lived experience and hand-won wisdom, hard-won wisdom, becomes the mentor Devin never had. Devin becomes the purpose Marcus was searching for. That's not a program outcome. That's what happens when you design for human beings instead of managing them. I personally witnessed a man who served 25 to life complete this journey. And today, um, he has multiple houses and a beautiful family. Um, he's now a journeyman. And so this is not hypothetical. This is what transformation looks like when the conditions are right. Most re-entry systems stabilize people temporarily. then send them back into the same conditions. I know this pathway personally. I'm an ARC MCQ graduate, apprentice Core 22 graduate myself. I was on my way to becoming a plumber until USC decided to take a chance on me. So here I am. And I've witnessed in my own eyes who went through training, become journeymen, fully vested after 5 years. Beautiful family, built their own built homes with their own two hands. That is not a program outcome. That is what transformation looks like when the conditions are. Oh, I said this already. So when I describe the pathway from labor to union credentials to home ownership, I'm not describing a theory. I'm speaking truth and reality. Freedom Village does three things differently. One, it's built by the residents. Labor becomes credentials, income, and opportunity. Permanence, not a 90-day churn. Pathway to ownership, backed by critical social infrastructure, recognition under SB4 in 2026 uh, Community Reinvestment Act updates. Wealth building by design. Day one stipends, rising union wages, and a resident trust fund toward homeownership, eliminating the cliff effect entirely. We don't manage failure, we design it out. I think we missed one. The evidence base before that. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Um, this is not built, this model is not built on hope. It's built on evidence. Ecological systems theory says change must happen at the individual, community, and structural levels simultaneously. You cannot heal in the same place that made you sick. Trauma-informed care, safety and empowerment are design principles. The community itself becomes the therapeutic container. Regenerative justice, not rehabilitation, full restoration of land, labor, and lives. Returning people not to the world that failed them, but to a world they helped build. I saw this firsthand at the Delancey Street Foundation, a self-sustaining multi-million-dollar organization built entirely by the people the system had written off. When people have structure, ownership, and community, they don't go back. The research confirms it. Programs, the programs confirm it, and I confirm it personally with my own eyes. Prototype and implementation pathway. Phase one, partnership development. This is where we lay the groundwork. We need to secure the land, establish partnerships with local organizations and unions, and critically involve future residents in the design process from day one. This co-design approach ensures the community reflects what residents actually need. Our target is to have the first resident move in by month 30, and they'll start earning wages immediately when phase two construction begins. Phase two, workforce integration. This is where the magic happens. Residents work alongside NAP2 union workers on construction. They start with stipends, but the pathway is clear. By years 3 to 5, they transition to full union wages and eventually home ownership. This isn't just about building homes. It's about building wealth and skills simultaneously. Phase three, launch and evaluation. Once operational, we rigorously track outcomes across 5 key domains to measure success. We then publish everything as open source so other communities can replicate this model. The underlying principle here is replicability. We're not building a one-off project. We're creating a scalable, adaptable blueprint that can work in different contexts and communities. These are not wishful targets. They're evidence-grounded benchmarks drawn from Board of Justice statistics, prison policy initiatives, Brookings, Shamsha, and the U.S. Energy Information Administration. 40 to 50% reduction in recidivism, achievable when housing, employment, and health are integrated. Over 70% in living wage employment, the anchor that stabilizes everything else. Income growth to 200 to 300% by year 3 to 5, reflecting real career, excuse me, um, uh, reflecting real career progression in union trades. Over 80% behavioral health engagement, sustained participation, not a one-time intake, and 80 to 100% energy self-sufficiency through one-site solar and a community infrastructure. Tracked across 5 domains, measured at 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years. Published open source. We're not hiding this. We're not hiding the numbers because the numbers hold. Two fundamentally different approaches to reentry. Traditional reentry is a liability, recurring annual expenses with no end in sight. Freedom Village is an asset, a one-time capital investment that appreciates. Why let someone eat leftovers while billions sit in a vault? Over 10 years, traditional reentry loses negative $900,000 per 10-person site. Freedom Village generates $2.4 million in combined asset value, savings, and resident equity. That is a $3.3 million swing. That table tells the story. Rental versus ownership. Grid dependency versus off-grid microgrid. Blighted land versus appreciating regenerative property. This isn't just better. It's a completely different financial question.
We have 1 minute, Arthur.
From the beginning, we've been measuring the wrong thing. Recidivism only tracks the absence of failure. It says nothing about the presence of wealth. $200 check in a lifetime of barriers. We give a seat to the table and deed in hand. Can you proceed? Can you go to the next slide, please? We've
The
covered
next
the
one.
problem. Sorry. Yeah, we've covered the problem. We've covered the proof. Now let's talk about what we build. Next slide, please. Here. So we're looking at what we're looking at is not a rendering of a dream. This is a engineered certainty. Every unit is built to passive house standards, the most rigorous energy efficiency standard in the world. Um, the cost stays at the V2 vehicle to grid battery storage means that even during peak Los Angeles heat waves, the light stays on. The cost stays at zero. Residents are removed from the utility market entirely. Rooftop solar, rainwater capture, raised bed regenerative gardens. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom built by the people who live in them. This isn't a goal. It's already designed, it's already costed, and it's ready to be built. Next, please.
And then I'm going to slide through the slides and then we can expand more at the Q&A, okay?
Okay. So basically, the demands are fully integrated reentry models, expand the Second Chance Act with real resources, recognize reentry apprenticeships federally, terminate community land trust protection in all 50 states, liberate, not incarcerate, build homes, not prison, Freedom is not given, it is built, one harvest, one home, one harvest, one community at a time. Um, calling into action, social workers, colleagues in human resources, services peers, nonprofits, Amity, ARC Homeboy Industries, state and local policymakers, regenerative permaculture and engineering organizations, public health policy, social justice, academic researchers, and philanthropists. The
I'm going to move forward further just to keep us
okay,
on time.
go ahead.
I appreciate you. This is a beautiful and like intricate, intensive process, and we will give more time to it, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank
Go
you for.
ahead.
No, I know it's okay. We appreciate your passion, 100%.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that the freedom, there's the FAQ bulk that I, like 3 pages of it that I hopefully that would answer most of the questions you may have because there's a lot of information here and uh, hopefully I mean I don't have all the answers yet, but hopefully I will be able. I mean the FAQ will be able to answer most of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you again for your thoroughness and transparency. I'm going to hand it off to Nicole and her team to zoom us out to a global macro perspective.
Thank you so much, and really powerful presentations. My name is Nicole Baldonado, and I am a social worker and a MSW student at Monmouth University. But more importantly, for this presentation, I'm a mother of 3 and spent most of my life in Ukraine and was displaced together with my family as a result of the war. So the background of our presentation is on humanitarian crises. Today, we see that global conflict is at its highest since 1946. More than 117 million people are forcibly displaced today, and over 473 million children live in areas affected by conflict. Humanitarian crises increase risks of family breakdown, interpersonal violence, and mental health problems. As examples, violence against women and children increase, risks of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder also increase, and common family structures are often shifted during humanitarian crises, which tend to put disproportionate burden of care on women. All these factors point to the importance of supporting caregivers and families during crises to mitigate risks for children. The Inspire package, which you see on the slide here, was developed by the World Health Organization, the CDC, UNICEF, and other global partners to promote 7 evidence-based strategies for prevention of violence against children. Of those strategies, 5 were incorporated into this program, which we are presenting on today, called Hope Groups. Next slide, please. The Hope Groups began in the context of the war in Ukraine, when Ukrainian caregivers shared with both Ukrainian and global subject matter experts that they really needed mental health and psychosocial support, as well as skills to know how to support their children in crisis. Together with these caregivers, our team combined bottom-up strategies of co-creation, implementation, and evaluation of the program with top-down strategies by utilizing existing evidence-based content, global expertise, and global and local partnerships. And this model enabled our team to collaboratively implement the program within 10 weeks of Russia's full-scale invasion and to begin evaluation within 8 months. Hope groups are psychosocial, mental health, and parenting support groups for caregivers in crisis. They are 10 to 12 sessions with 8 participants led by trained peer facilitators. And now I'm going to ask my colleague Ludmila Bryn to share about the Hope Group's implementation and evaluation in Ukraine.
Hello, my name is Ludmila Bryn, and I'm leading Children Mission, a faith-based Ukrainian NGO that trains people in local communities to provide effective support for children, including trauma-informed care. So naturally, when the war began in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea by Russia, so we started equipping adults to work with war-affected children. And when that war evolved into full-scale war in 2022, we stayed in Ukraine together with our people so we can support adults and support as many children as possible. So as of today, it's 4 years, 1 month, and 4 days of a full-scale war. Especially regions near the front line and parts under Russian occupation experience widespread violence, destruction, and humanitarian catastrophe. So people flee, and mostly these are ladies with kids or elderly people. So according to the latest United Nations data, Ukraine has 3.8 million internally displaced people, 5.3 million refugees globally, and approximately 12.7 million need humanitarian assistance inside Ukraine. Next slide, please. So hope groups were created or were born as a tool to support people who experience war and displacement. They are effective because Ukrainian hope groups facilitators themselves are impacted by war and displacement. I am personally as one of the co-authors, and I had to flee my city of Kyiv on the third day of the war back in 2022. I was blessed to return after 2 months to my own home. I'm still sitting here, and this apartment is yet not harmed by any missile attack. So not everybody in Ukraine is so lucky, but everybody needs support to see hope. So that's why we chose such a name for this curriculum. So far, we have engaged 2.5, almost 2.5 thousand families, including those in certain countries where Ukrainian refugees fled. And obviously in every region of Ukraine except occupied peninsula of Crimea, which was occupied back in 2014, and we don't have connections with any people there. It's implemented in collaboration with Children Mission NGO, World Without Orphans, Ukraine Without Orphans, Nehemiah NGO, and churches throughout Ukraine. And you can see these dots that show how many of the groups were done in each region of Ukraine. Next slide, please. From the very beginning, we were researching evaluating how effective it is. So we used cluster randomized controlled trial through University of Oxford, and it shows that hope groups caused significant improvements across all measured outcomes. As you can see on this slide, that violence against children and caregiver depression has decreased, while positive parenting, nonviolent discipline, and especially relying on God for strength and caregiver self-care significantly enhanced because people were part of hope groups. So here in Ukraine, we see the following future direction. We want to continue scaling. We plan to adapt the content for families of active military and veterans. We also plan to adapt the content for adolescents, and we want to implement hope groups in conjunction with child-focused programs such as trauma care camps like Operation Safe Curriculum. Nicole?
Thank you so much, Ludmila. As we began to share the findings that Ludmila just shared from Ukraine, demand for hope groups rose in crisis settings across the globe, as you can see on this map. We began leveraging evidence-based frameworks such as ADAPT to engage local stakeholders in each place and contextualize together. The books on the side of the slide show some of the contextualization just from a graphic perspective. And within 3 years, we've been able to implement hope groups in 18 different countries. Next slide, please. The first adaptation we did was in the nation of Colombia, where hope groups supported surviving caregivers of children who had been orphaned by COVID-19. In this context, there were high rates of COVID-19 deaths, mental health problems, chronic health conditions, poverty, and violence against children. And some of the strengths of the Colombian model included a willingness of the authorities locally to increase services and link hope groups to existing programs, an existing national action plan for preventing violence against children, and strong local capacity for implementation. Next slide, please. The findings in Colombia were similar to Ukraine. As you can see on the slide, we had statistically significant decreases in caregiver depression, child behavioral issues, and violence against children. To date, about 956 caregivers and children have participated in the program, and the University of Sucre has integrated hope groups into their curriculum. We still have strong governmental and institutional support, and we're actively expanding the Hope Groups program into an additional 5 countries in Latin America. Now I will ask my colleague Nasreen to share about the Hope Groups in Jordan.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you everyone for being here today. It's really a privilege to share a bit about our work in Jordan and how Hope Groups has been adapted in a context of long-term displacement. We implemented Hopi groups in Gaza camp in Jerash, which was established in 1968 for Palestinian refugees. More than 50 years later, families are still living in conditions of long-term, multi-generational displacement, facing poverty, overcrowding, limited services, and high unemployment. And this reality is deeply reflected in the data. At baseline, we saw very high levels of distress. About 85% of parents had depressed symptoms, and 60% reported feeling that they would be better off dead. Children were also heavily affected. 82% had experienced emotional abuse. 55% showed depressive symptoms, and 30% expressed that they wished they were dead. So this is not just a difficult environment. It's a context where families are under constant emotional and psychological pressure. And this is exactly why Hope Groups was introduced, to support caregivers with emotional healing, parenting tools, and help rebuild safer and stronger family relationships. Next, please. And what we started to see is that cultural adaptation really works. When caregivers are given a safe and supportive space, they begin to open up, and many of them for the first time. They start processing their experiences, sharing their stories, and supporting one another. What was especially powerful is that participants did not just listen. They started applying what they learned at home from the very first sessions. We saw a shift from silence to participation, from isolation to connection. And as one participant shared, this became a place of love, comfort, support, and safety, where I could share grief and connect with others, which taught me to create this same environment for my children at home. Next, please. In terms of implementation, we reached 273 caregivers through 7 waves, with around 35 to 55 participants in each wave. The groups were facilitated by 6 trained local leaders, which was a key part of the model. Working through trusted facilitators from the community helped build the trust, increase engagement, and ensure the program felt relevant and accessible. And this is especially important in contexts like this, where trust and relationships play a central role in participation and impact. Looking at the results, we see strong positive changes. There was about a 40% reduction in depression and anxiety among participants in Hope groups. And we also saw around a 45% reduction in violence against children. So overall, participants experienced meaningful improvements in both their mental health and their parenting practices. Next, please.
Thank you so much, Nasreen. So here on this final slide, you can see a comparison of increased hopefulness among caregivers in Colombia, Jordan, and Ukraine after they completed a Hope group. We believe that these findings, which show similarity across such different contexts, reflect important lessons that we're continuing to learn in this work amidst humanitarian crises. First of all, combining this bottom-up and top-down model has allowed for rapid, contextualized, evidence-based, and trauma-sensitive programming and evaluation in crises. Recruiting implementers and participants from trusted known networks, as Nasreen shared, helps to overcome skepticism, which is often high during crises. Peer lay facilitators mean that support is increased for the community without adding to the already overburdened mental health workforce. Flexibility is absolutely essential when crises are often rapidly and repeatedly changing the circumstances in which we work. Burnout, which was mentioned and covered in our earlier talk today, is a significant risk among helpers all over the world, and it is especially true in crisis scenarios. So intentionally creating structures and tools to support the well-being of those implementing programs in crisis is needed. And finally, innovative evaluation methods are needed to conduct rigorous evaluation in a trauma-informed way in crises. Overall, our experience is demonstrating that lessons like these can be leveraged to equip practitioners and researchers to collaborate with crisis-affected communities, rapidly and effectively empower families, and honor affected populations' strengths amidst crisis. Thank you.
Thank all of you. I appreciate the insight and really the global impact and feasibility of what you're doing. And also thank you for joining us on all hours of the day. It's much appreciated. So going to do the whole stop screen share so that we can see you all. Well, awesome. So I guess I get to ask all the questions today. I'm not not mad about it. Let's do it in the reverse today. Nicole, Lydia, and Nisreen, I would love to know, when working across crisis contexts, like how do you determine what elements of the model must remain versus consistent versus what must be culturally redesigned?
Thank you. That's a great question. So we do use evidence-based frameworks. For example, there's a framework that's called ADAPT, which helps guide that process of maintaining evidence-based strategies and content while contextualizing for another culture, another situation. But I think both Ludmila and Nasreen can speak to this, the importance of collaborating locally with people. And whenever I personally am engaging in a new context, I try to take a very humble backseat position and listen to the local people and the local affected population and the local experts. I don't know, Nasreen and Ludmila, if either of you have anything to add.
Just I wanted to say sometimes we have to be very careful and sensitive for some cultural words. That is, it's in our culture is completely different than other cultures, and also to make sure that it's culturally adapted with religion, because it has to be scientific, accepted from the culture.
I think for us it was easy because we were the first ones. So we originally were adapting the internationally available materials and compiling it for the situation locally, or because all of us were in the same kind of situation of being replaced and stressful, affected by war. So kind of we evaluated, and so yeah, that's what we feel is needed, and we observed a lot. So we started with 4 meetings and then it grew into 10. So it was like natural observation research, I would call it like that.
Thank you both.
Yes, thank all three of you. And then Arthur, beautiful. There is a question in the Q&A that has, what thoughts, both to Nicole and Arthur, what thoughts have you had regarding evaluation of your projects? How will you know the projects have been successful? Arthur, if you want to start, and then we can pop back over to Nicole.
Well, there are several phases that we need to there are several phases that we need to check, like on a 6-month term, 1 month, 1 year, 3 years, and then 5 years. We start with a prototype, 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms, right? And then we will test that. We see how we'll find out how much it costs, what materials we need, and then see if it's something that will actually work. Uh, and then when that happens, then we put it out as a model for replication, and then that's when we put it out as, this is what we can do. This is how we can build the freedom villages, by with this 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and then with the raised beds, permaculture, regenerative landscaping, where they can actually grow their own food. Um, and then once we have the Freedom Village, then we just get it replicated to another area. We actually like to start it out with, because the people that's going to build this place, that's going to build this, are the people that's are going to be from those neighborhoods that we're going to build it in, right? So they're basically adding value to their own neighborhood. They're changing the whole neighborhood from down up, right? Um, um, how do we? Okay, so basically, there's a lot of research needs to be done, and I can't even name all of them. I don't know if I've answered the question, but that's kind of like, where we're gonna, start it off. Just basically starting off with the prototype, and um, and then go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. And Nicole, I know you did show, right, like the impacts of it, and different evaluation methods, but yeah, please speak a little more if you would like.
Yeah, so in Ukraine, we did both a pre-post evaluation and a randomized controlled trial of the HOPE groups. And the pre-post was published in the Journal of Science and Migration, or Migration and Health. And then the preprint is available of the randomized controlled trial in Ukraine on the Lancet Regional Europe right now. And then in Jordan, we are continuing to conduct a randomized control trial. So the results that Nasreen shared on her slide are some of the interim analyses, but we are continuing to finalize that research, and we'll be intending to publish that as well. In Colombia, we conducted a quasi-experimental trial, and the preprint of the evaluation is also available online. So I'm happy to share those with anyone who would like to get in touch with me. And then I think, how will we know it worked? So it's interesting, especially having both Ludmila and Nasreen here today, because of course, as Ludmila said, and I have to say, Ludmila is the individual who named the Hope Group. So I always feel like I want to honor her with that. And it's been a very powerful name. So in Ukraine, we really want to see this scaling and expanding, and really being in collaboration, in conjunction with other programs that can provide kind of holistic care around families. As we face war and displacement, increased family risks are they're rising, and so we really want to provide those wraparound services for families and children and caregivers. And that would be the goal, is that kind of rapid, or that broader scale support at a population level. And of course, in Jordan, we're continuing to grow in the Jerash camp, but I know that Nasreen is interested also in seeing Hope groups in other parts of the country, and with other populations outside of only the Palestinian refugee community. So, Nasreen and Ludmila, if either of you would like to add to that.
I just want to add, for us, evaluation is essential. We use baseline and endline assessment to track changes in caregivers' mental health, parenting, and violence against children. But success isn't just the data. It's also whether the caregivers feel more hopeful, more regulated, and more connected to their children, and whether children are safer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all so much. I know that I feel inspired and hopeful, and I know that I want to connect with you all after this. So thank you. So I'm gonna screen share again, and then share sound. Oh, it won't let me share sound. Just kidding. Okay. That's okay. So now we have, gone through applying healing to the profession, getting to look at some folks that are emerging into new research that is much needed, and then also systems and global impact. And so now we're going to take a 10-minute break because I know I have to use the restroom. I don't know about anybody else. And I'll put a timer up here so you'll know when the time is up. And also, I know that we're running a little behind, but I promise I'll make it up at the end. So take 10 minutes, and thank you all for everyone who has participated and also has joined us today. All right, we have a little bit less than a minute if folks want to start making their way back. I hope that was enough time to reset. I did have a cute little playlist planned, but again, Zoom has other ideas for me today, which is fine. As folks start rolling back in, I just wanted to kind of just let folks see, and I did drop in the chat the agenda and the slide deck for folks, but just this kind of what the rest of our time together looks like. We have, oh, there's something, oh, it's the thingy. Yeah, okay. It was beeping in my ear. I'm like, oh, no, no, no. People with anxiety can't handle those things. Okay. So again, we have three more sections with some beautiful presenters. And I also, even though integratively throughout the whole morning so far, we've had, those kind of like deep topics as we often do in social work and serving and helping professions. But I just remember I wanted to remind about that community care. So some upcoming presentations might engage more deeply in personal topics, including stigma, grief, protection, and systemic harm. So we encourage you to move at your own pace. You're always welcome to step away and take a breath. You can also private message any of us, and we're happy to support. And again, we're grateful for the care that you're extending to yourselves and to one another during this space. So without further amazing ado, we're going to move to our next section with Simone, who I would like to just last week passed her exam and is now a flashy LCSW. So Simone, when you are ready, let's take it away.
Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank the previous presenters. Oh my gosh, this morning has been just amazing. Thank you for your congratulations. Yeah, all right, so let's roll right into it. Picture this. An Asian American patriarch purchases a gun to protect his family from discrimination. His 5-year-old daughter later uses that same gun to die. A socially isolated and culturally shunned single mother, addicted to drugs, stands in front of her 7-year-old mixed son. She holds pills in one hand and a phone in the other. She dials 988, the suicide hotline number, instead. Hello, everyone. My name is Simone Webster. I am an LCSW. I am an MSW alumna. I actually was in Phi Alpha during my MSW chapter, I guess you could say. I am now a current DSW student, and my background is in religious studies from UC Santa Barbara. All right. So first and foremost, while suicide impacts all, culture is context, and suicide cannot be universally addressed. So today I wanted to talk to all of us about Asian American women and girls needing culturally competent approaches based on generational needs and their access to resources and tools. So suicide, it appears in a cyclical pattern. So as we know, we can't really approach it from a cookie cutter approach, but the cookie cutter approach more per se gives us a place to start. And so if we recognize these precipitating vulnerable factors along with lived experiences, we can provide individualized care. So what are some primary risk factors? This is just across the board. So first and foremost, we consider the person's personal history of suicide. Next, their access to basic mental health care, a person's perceived burdensomeness, and a lack of belonging and isolation. Asian American women and girls and other minorities are also at risk of something that we call hidden suicidal ideation. And so what is hidden suicidal ideation? Hidden suicidal ideation is pretty much suicidal ideation that is not shown. And this has culminated based off of historical shame and modern stigma. So let's talk about the history, right? So this is specific to just China. I'm going to be talking about several subgroups of Asian subgroups, and I will talk about how they differ and how they compare and also have patterns across the board, all right? So historically, mental health was criminalized and enforced by the community in China. So in fact, Chinese government would actually require the community members, including family and even lawful authorities, to address, monitor, and police individuals with mental health barriers and physical ailments. And so that would constitute as like birth defects. Even being an unwed mother would be considered as having a physical ailment. So at one point, the Chinese government actually would supply these chains, and then this later escalated into more publicly violent acts. So how did that transfer over to the West? And so I don't know how many folks are familiar with the model citizen. So the model citizen is pretty much this sort of program onto society that began among Japanese Americans after World War II. And so this pretty much put Japanese Americans into this prototype of being hardworking, docile, and subservient. And so thus then it became a myth that then blanketed other subgroups across Asian Americans that came over. And then thus then eventually became more or less the forever immigrants where we are unable to move outside of these labels and dynamics. And other historical cases that contributed to this was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which actually wasn't even condemned until 2011 to 2012 by Congress. So that was around for a really long time, along with the Gary Act. The Gary Act is very similar to what we are witnessing today. Pretty much it is the requirement of papers, more or less, to be here in America. And then, of course, there's the Japanese internment camps as well. These are all things that have contributed. Awesome. And so thus then it became shames modernized as stigma. And so thus then these stereotypes were birthed based off of the feared success of Asian Americans during this time. And so we had concepts like the yellow peril. We effeminized the Asian male. So thus then it removed the efficacy and strength of Asian men. We slut shamed the Asian women and we called them robots, and we deemed them to be morally salacious yet sexually frigid. And so thus then created this double bind nature where racism and sexism has trickle down effects. It not only affects women, but it also affects men too. It affects everyone. So how has that impacted us today? So we actually have the lowest rates of using Western mental health services despite experiencing high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. So pretty much what happens is we will be asked if there is something up with our mental health, right? And because of our past stigma and interpretations and experiences, we might say no because we don't want to be criminalized, or we don't want to be sectioned off, or we don't want to be labeled as something, right? And so this, coupled with the post era of COVID-19, kind of like raised suicidality. So let me explain why, right? So during COVID-19, there was an uptick of like discrimination among Asians in America. And so thus, as a response, Asians began to buy firearms and have firearms in their homes. And then later on, these same firearms were then used to die by suicide. So the normalization of violence perpetuates the societal neglect of Asian American women and girls. So are our current approaches to suicidality culturally competent? So clinical mental health professionals like myself have been coached to take a direct stance when it comes to discussing suicidality. Research indicates that we do not respond well to confrontation, and we as an Asian American women, Asians in general, and will revert to hidden suicidal ideation. It's like what I said in the previous slide. If someone asks us if we are struggling with something, we're more likely to say no, and then we're going to turn around and try our best efforts to minimize any signs of us struggling. So we might overexert, aka falling right into that model minority myth. So research has indicated that Asian American women and girls are disclosing in two public spheres, all right? So we're talking about it in medical offices and we're talking about it in schools. And so these two spaces have cultural significance. And so because of this cultural assumptions that if we are doing well in school and work, then nothing is quote unquote wrong with us. When in fact, we may be struggling a lot more than we are letting on to because of this model minority myth. When we fail to recognize these cultural idioms, right? So what I mean by cultural idioms, so when we are in medical offices and in schools, we are talking about our mental health in different ways. And so we are more or less using symbolized speech, right? So we use cultural idioms. And what I mean by cultural idioms is that we may say one thing and it means another. And so these cultural idioms are really what we should be paying attention to when we are working with folks one-on-one and in group settings, right? And so these cultural idioms arise from family discord, cultural shame, and identity ostracization. So there's this pervasive myth that mental health, quote unquote, does not exist, right? And it's not that it doesn't exist. It's not that we don't have the language. It's not any of that. It's a combination of many things. And maybe we are talking about it, and maybe we're just not listening to the correct words. So let me talk to you a bit about cultural idioms, right? So here are some examples. So the first one is a cultural idiom from my culture, the Thai culture. And so we would say, กินข้าวยังไหม? And so what that translates into is, have you eaten today? And so if I type that into Google Translate, กินข้าวยัง? And I got back, have you eaten today? And I said that to somebody else, they'd be like, yeah, Simone, I ate today. Like, what are you talking about? But what I'm talking about is, are you good? Like, are you good? Are you solid? Do you need to take care of yourself? Do you need to wash your plate? So the next one too is hungry ghost. And so this kind of explains the taboo topics that we're really not supposed to talk about per se. So this is equivalent as like around the campfire, talking about things that we should not do in terms of urban legends. And so an example of this would be like, don't trust people that you don't know because they could be monsters, X, Y, and Z. So like we use a lot of symbolism when we describe things that are taboo. So oftentimes, not always, but what we hear with the hungry ghost, sometimes in the Western culture, we use it to describe addiction. So the next one is a hole in the heart. So this is actually from Japanese culture. And so this is related to grief-related longing or yearning. The last one is our wife. This is from Korean culture, and it's a oneness with others, and maybe others could say even a lack of autonomy, or even just an approach of how we are collectively all together. It depends on the perspective and the person's experience. So what are some recommendations, right? So here are my systematic recommendations. So one of the most important things is like educating, educating ourselves, educating staff, educating individual folks that are serving those in medical and also in school settings, right? So this would be like hospitals, social workers, nurses, first emergency respondents. This would even then be school social workers, teachers, student aides, and even support in staff schools. And so research shows that those who are like in support, like direct service, they're the ones that are impacting and hearing this disclosure the most. So if they know what to look out for, they're more likely to be able to show up and reach to meet the person where they're at. So this one is for social workers. And so this is also based on literature review. So this is generationally sliced, right? So with elders, less tech for them, right? So more social activities. So like when you see like group walks, we want to endorse more group walks together because group walking actually gets us to talk a little bit more. Another traditional game is Mahjong. And so Mahjong has been used in the past to teach and practice social etiquette. So like this kind of teaches you how to practice interpersonal skills. Another really fun one is karaoke. So if you do want to do karaoke, you can do that under DBT, okay? So it's called like sound throwing. And if you want it, I will tell you how to do it. So the next one is first generation Asian Americans. They're more likely to participate in traditional Western therapy and will actually make attempts to destigmatize mental health by encouraging family members to become involved, either individually or as a family, right? So they're the ones that are going to destigmatize. And so the next one is second and third generation. While we are more open to mental health due to being born and growing up in Western society and on the internet, we continue actually to request more self-guided mental health options. So think about things like workbooks, think about things like games that they can play one-on-one with, like sort of like Mahjong, but a little bit more cooler, like not so like traditional. A little bit more up to date, right? Another one too is that if they interact with someone, let's say in a chat basis, they want somebody like another human to be on the other side if it's a tech platform. But the main thing across the board is connection. Just connection is key everywhere. So that is it from me. Those are all my references. Kapun Maka.
Thank you so much, Simone. I really appreciate the code switching guidance into therapeutic language. But thank you for grounding not only in like history, long-term impact, but then how to move forward. Which I also believe transitions beautifully into our next speaker. Anne, are you ready?
Hello. I hope you guys are enjoying presentation so far. Just like Simone, I am also Thai, and we're gonna talk about, the duality of being power and overpower because I work in jail. Let's go to get to know me slide, a little bit of my background. So as a person, I'm a first generation Asian immigrant, and she's right. I'm more likely to seek out mental health than say my parents, than say my sister, because I'm much more acculturated, if you will. I'm a daughter of proud immigrant parents. There's nothing wrong with that. They came, the whole like fresh off the boat thing. I have been there. I'm a poet, an animal lover, because, well, if you take me anywhere, if you're my friends, you already know I'm very easy to kidnap if you have a dog in front of me and just distract me with that. I'm also speak multiple language, so I can go hello, which is English. I can go สวัสดีค่ะ or 你好. So that's many ways I say hello. I'm also a woman in Trump America. But as a professional, I'm a licensed marriage therapist and also a scholar examining mass incarceration and racial trauma in the using the Holden approach and using what's already worked. I'm also a person who have worked in low-income community. I worked for many years. I worked deep in the heart of Tenderloin, San Francisco. I have done residential. I have done housing, and so on. And currently, I'm working in jail. Next slide. So before I jump into the whole thing, right, I already brought you in the duality of that exists within my identity. And I just want to take a moment, have somebody, 1 or 2 persons kind of look at this slide and come off mute and tell me what jumps out, what kind of word jumps out at you.
Non-emotional, first and foremost. Oh, sounds like a native English speaker. People tell me that all the time, and then they hear that I'm not.
Yep, I see Su Chen in the chat say competitive. But the thing is, I code switch. I've been code switching since the day I got off the plane. I have to code switch because it's a mean of survival, but survival is not a bad thing. It's my tactical armor. I'm translating myself in real time. Why? Because I want to translate me the way I see me before the room, before anyone else. Tell me who I am. And this is not just in jail context, it's in the larger America context. When I'm at work, I'm this version of me. When I am at institution somewhere, I'm that version. And I just came from seeing a client, so I was also translating myself in real time there. So, it's an art of survival, but also the negotiation and dance of being oneself, no matter the context. Next slide. And so why would you say identity matter in jail? It is because mostly it's hyper-masculine. It's built on power and control. And jail and prison, like briefly, it's differentiated by the long-term and short-term stay. And in my current county jail context, it's kind of like medium length stay because a lot of the guys that I work with here, they have been waiting for sentence for like at least 2 years. And the longest resident was 25 year waiting sentence and just left for prison like a day or so ago. It's very hierarchical. We have anything from like the captain, watch commander, sergeant, and so on and so forth, but it's all male based, right? It's unemotive. It's very objective. So I have to relearn how to translate myself in that context also. So meaning like code switch and talk in their lingo. It thrives on discipline and surveillance and institutional control. which is really interesting because I am a power person in here as a staff, but I'm also being surveilled everywhere due to the camera and security everywhere. And it's also observation of regulation of bodies and so on and so forth. I can go on this topic of why identities matter. Go ahead. So let's take a little philosophical detour, shall we? Let's look at Foucault's stance on discipline and punishment. If you don't know, Foucault is a French philosopher who studies like how institutions control behavior through surveillance and discipline. And when I say surveillance and discipline, I want you to take that context and apply it to broader society, especially in Trump America. It's a concept that disciplinary power help like you and help everyone understand how like institutions like carceral space regulates body, behavior, and authority through surveillance and institutional norm. And if you take that context and apply to what's happening right now, it is very clear, right? Because before I got here on the plane, I don't have the social security number. But once I got here and have the social security number, I become an inmate. What do I mean by that? It's little track of number that allows the government to track you and also figure out what have you done with your life and benefit off of you. And yes, I am visible right now, but it is a trap because I'm being constantly surveilled in here, and it's also kind of like negotiate, like, okay, do I have authority? Do I not have authority? So on and so forth. And the last point is I already mentioned this is bigger than being in jail. Next slide. So let's look at Crenshaw intersectionality. Crenshaw is a Black feminist who, come up with the idea of like how intersectionality of your identity affect the power, discriminations, and also real world consequences like access to healthcare, access to opportunity, glass ceiling, you name it. It is about race, gender, and professional role that comes together. And in my case, it does every day. And it's about like combating this Asian woman stereotype, which Simone has mentioned earlier. And it's clashed with the fact that I'm an Asian woman, but I'm outspoken. And I will tell you in a heartbeat, which clash with the clinical authority expectation and negotiation of the professional authority and working with the law enforcement, because in this context, you have to step up and you have to be like, no, this is what we're doing. No, that's not, you're not going to push me. Next slide. So in conclusion, let's really wrap around our mind and look at this summarized slide, right? Institutional power and structural context. You know about Foucault's will, you know about racial disproportionality in incarceration and the lack of diversity in correctional staff, including my departmental staff, and the diversity in race is something that still continue to happen and perpetuate no matter how much DEI they want to appear. And let's look at the model minority myth real quick. Water break. Simone has done a good job at laying the framework, and we just want to really like hone it in and bring it home because, as an Asian woman, I've seen as quiet, submissive, good immigrant, which actually hurts more than hell. It is used to weaponize to say, hey, you shut up. Hey, you don't go get idea of how to organize and speak up for yourself and your community. And actually, this model put us on a pedestal. At the pedestal that we are good, blah, 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 and weaponize that as, diversity in the workforce. because I am the token Asian in my workforce. And it also, hinders community like Black community, Asian community, and community of color to all together to come together in solidarity. It's a burden of fighting to be seen and taken seriously and respected in all spaces. That also include mental and medical spaces. So here's also another thing that we don't ever talk about, and everyone squirm when I said, "Hey, come on, we have microaggression here." It's about microaggression in role, and it's most visible in the incarceral space because I am the token Asian. Therefore, I got assigned all kind of Asian naming clients, assuming that I speak the language, which I do not. It's about being pervasive. It's about like stereotype to the max, right? It's questioning like, oh, yeah, like, are you ready for the leadership role or not? But I said I am, and then being passed down to someone else, right? It's about translating myself in real time and my leadership skill, doubt, and challenge, or when I speak out, got written up and pulled into manager's office or something. Next slide. So summary, question authority, it has real world consequences because when the opportunity came up, instead of being considered, you are being passed out, right? When the important conversation is happening, you're not gonna know until it's decided, right? Gender dynamic, there's more than once when women of color, such as myself, who works in jail, say, hey, this client just masturbated in front of me. And we were told, that's just how they are. It's racialized assumption in the sense that, okay, model minority, microaggressions. Oh, that's just how you are. Go ahead. So question is, am I too soft for jail? Actually, that's not a question about me. It is about like navigating rigid space like jail to build to overpower and how to show up in a relational context. As a therapist and an Asian woman of color, I chose to say, you know what, screw you. I'm gonna show up as me and my clinical expertise and my lived experience. And you're gonna deal with me. When I walk into jail, I don't leave that shit at home, at the door, or at the gate. Okay. Next slide. So basically, I'm accepting my duality as strength. It's my armor, and you can't tell me otherwise, right? It's a full integration of intersectionality and identity, and adopt the let them theory. If you don't know what it is, it's like, okay, whatever you think, cool, that's on you. I'm gonna keep doing me. It's about staying rooted and understand why I started in this profession in the first place, because, well, we need someone who speak up for my community. Next slide. So here's the key takeaway. Bias continue to have real impact, and it's just because someone tells you like your identity does not matter, does not mean you have to listen. You integrate that with your professional self, with your personal self, and brought your magic that is you, and brought in and just be like, come on, I own this, okay? And you're not gonna tell me otherwise. It's about staying curious and flexible and allowing for adaptation instead of just surviving. Because at the end, authority is claimed and not granted. You take it. You take it without being apologetic. You take it not asking questions. You take it not asking permission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate the empowerment, leaning, and also the humanness of like you get to be you. Because sometimes I feel like that imposter syndrome can sneak in and we forget that our whole selves are allowed to be there. Let me do the stop share so that we can move into our questions. I will try to, I don't see any in the chat yet, but that doesn't mean they won't be there. Simone, I would love to know if cultural silence can function as both protection and harm. How can social workers determine when intervention is necessary without reproducing colonial or pathologizing dynamics?
Very easily ask them. Show up where they're at. Just ask them, how can I show up? How can I be here for you? Just show up and just meet them where they're at. And also be curious. I like to say be open to not knowing. Does that make sense? Because when we say that we don't know, it gives us an opportunity to thus then go research, and then it gives us an opportunity to loop back around and tell them why. It gives us like a chance to talk to them again. So yeah, so ask them.
Yeah, and show up as you. Like someday I show up cussing with my clients in the room. It's like, man, fuck this, you know, and be like, so I'm here. What do you want? How do we help you? Essentially, because someday they just need some healing and not someone with professional accolade to show up.
100%.
I love that. Yes, I love that your add-in and like literally starts answering the question that I prepped for you. So thanks so much, and now you get to expand. No, I love it. I was just thinking like you started to speak into it about like what everyone can do, but like what would a truly culturally self-determined model of protection look like if it was designed outside of the dominant institutional system?
Well, for me, myself, and I, like I've done code switching. I'm a professional code switcher, right? My friends know this. My colleagues know this. So for me, it's like you assess situation. You walk in like unapologetically, and you are in control. It's like just walk in and be curious. But I don't have the formal model yet. That may be in the works. Simone and I can talk about that offline, right?
Yeah.
I'll be ready for a full thing next year. Both of you just going to take over the whole thing. I was trying to write like a good but snarky thing in the chat while you finished, but I was just saying like that should, you know how like oh, we need bilingual mandatory, that then we like you should, if you have to code switch, then you should automatically be in a higher salary tier. So match it with pay. So
yeah,
thank you both. Go ahead.
Yeah, because the universe is paying me no matter what.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. These are beautiful presentations, and I really appreciate your approaches. All right, so I'm going to go back to sharing. Okay, awesome. So now, while you will see 4 folks on the slide, we're going to have 2 amazing powerhouse DSW students hold down for their team. Camille and Carla, are you ready?
Yes, we are ready. Thank you. So my name is Camille Rodriguez, and I'm joined with Carla Francisco, and we're both powerhouse GSW students at the USC, University of Southern California. We're going to be talking today about protection, grief, and cultural justice for Black women experiencing intimate partner violence. We'll do some introductions, go over the problem, talk about what's in the literature and what gaps there are in the literature, review some current solutions, our research project design, and proposed solutions. And then as our understanding, we'll do Q&A after the next session. So we'll get to some questions. So Lynn, who could not join us today, is the owner of Phoenix Risings Counseling Center and Sankofa Healing Haven. She's also a single mother of 5-year-olds. So she is very busy, very busy woman. And then me, I am a master's level social worker working in homeless services. I'm also an associate professor of sociology and currently working on my DSW at USC, as I said before. I'll let Carla introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla. I am currently in private practice at Optimizing You Counseling Services. I also serve as a consultant and clinical director for a nonprofit agency. And I am a DSW student, a powerhouse DSW student at USC School of Social Work, along with my colleagues.
And then we have Deshamel Bowie Russ, who is a LCSW. She is a EDD as well, and also, crazily enough, earning her DSW. She's insane. I don't know how she's doing this all, but she is there. She's an adjunct clinical psychology professor, a scholar practitioner, and a Pilates princess. So she's currently at another conference right now and couldn't escape. So that's why she's not joining us today. But we will represent her well. So, what's the current problem? The current problem is that Black women in the United States face disproportionate harm from intimate partner violence, with over 45% of them reporting lifetime experience rates, which are higher than those of their white and Latina counterparts. Black women are marginalized at every step of the way: gender, race. We're the most oppressed folks when you think about oppression and biases and things like that here in the United States. Next slide, please. So when we talk about building healthy relationships to end violence, what we wanted to focus on for our research project was, what was the problem? How do we resolve the problem? And it all really comes down to knowledge, prevention, and centering Black voices and those solutions. Next slide, please. We have the opportunity to save Black women from intimate partner violence and to prevent Black women from experiencing intimate partner violence in general at all. Next slide. And currently in the literature talks about intersectionality and structural violence. Anne brought up Kimberly Crenshaw's work of this concept of intersectionality, so I won't touch on that since she already did. Lovely, thank you. But she also talked about this concept of triple jeopardy that's faced by Black women, where racism, sexism, and economic oppression intersects. That structural violence is manifested through racial discrimination, housing inequality, and poverty is shown to intensify intimate partner violence risk and exacerbates its impact. So Black women who are experiencing IPV are experiencing it, yes, but they're experiencing it at a rate in which their Latina and white counterparts are not, and at a more severe rate as well, with more severe consequences. Currently 41%, or when we were doing this research, about 41% of non-Hispanic Black women reported physical IPV, 17% reported sexual violence, and 9.5% reported stalking. And in addition to all of that, we as in Black women are disproportionately represented among homicide victims, making up about roughly 30% of those killed by intimate partners, while only being 8% of the population. Pregnancy is a heightened time of vulnerability for Black women, and we account for around 55% of pregnancy-associated femicides, which is a form of IPV-related homicide. And femicide is the killing of a woman or girl by a man because of her gender. Oh, thank you. So we also, in the literature, talk about, or we can read about, psychological burden and coping. And a lot of qualitative studies underscore the profound emotional toll of IPV, and that psychological abuse and coercive control were centered in a lot of survivors' narratives, and it often overlapped with systemic pressures like housing insecurity, economic insecurity, and just the overall uncertainty of what happens when they try to leave these abusive relationships. And then in the literature, it also discussed delays in seeking assistance due to expected racism and mistrust of providers. And folks only enter the system when violence peaks and it either can't be taken anymore or lives may be lost or something like that. The interaction with the police and legal system is often negative because of negative stereotypes and discrimination and criminalization of Black women, even when they are acting in self-defense and have every right to protect their bodies or the people that they love who are witnessing that IPV. And then Black survivors often receive less support at work than their white counterparts, which leads to compounding stress. There are some co-occurring risk factors and structural inequities too. So housing instability, community violence, pregnancy risks, all of those are heightened for Black women experiencing intimate partner violence. But there are some promising interventions and justice approaches, such as the trauma and violence-informed care that incorporates cultural responsiveness, addressing race, gender, and context shown effective in domestic violence settings. There's transformative justice models, which is an emerging framework that are coming out of the COVID era studies that highlight restorative solutions, community-based supports, and moving away from punitive legal systems. And then advocates point to a need for Black-centric services, safe housing, legal aids, culturally attuned mentoring, and universal IPV screening for all peoples, especially during pregnancy. But there are some gaps in the research. So there isn't any longitudinal data that tracks Black women's IPV experiences over time. That includes mental health outcomes and resilience factors. There's a lack of Black-led intervention research, policy studies, and examining how legislation around like firearms, maternal health, and housing influences IPV outcomes for Black women. And then there needs to be a deeper exploration of overlap between IPV, reproductive justice, and community level violence. So some current innovations. Right now, there are agencies that are doing good work and centering Black women's voices, but they may not necessarily be doing a lot of like a holistic approach to something. So they may not be doing housing plus mental health plus medical. They might be doing one piece of a solution that we'll talk about later. But we have the Black Women First initiative that really centers the Black woman's experience and who's experiencing IPV. They do design and implementation and evaluation of evidence-informed interventions for Black women with HIV. There's the Sasha Center, which is a Black woman-led, culturally specific sexual assault healing agency based in Detroit. They provide peer educational support and group services for self-identified experiencers of sexual assault, and they center the lived experiences of Black women and girls in Southeast Michigan and beyond. And then they both also do policy recommendation calls to help better inform policy that's supposed to support individuals, Black women who are experiencing intimate partner violence.
Okay, so in our research project, we brought together 18 participants to design a solution to the problem of intimate partner violence against Black women and to assist in filling the research gaps. And here was our design criteria, and I'll give an explanation of that. So design criteria are basically the guiding principles that shape how we build a solution. And for us, some of those guiding principles were what matters most, who we're centering, and what the solution needs to do to truly work. For us, these criteria ensure that our approach is culturally relevant, trauma-informed, and rooted in the lived experiences of Black women. Slide, please. So, solutions to the problem. Based on the gaps in literature and the lived experiences of Black women, we developed 2 solution models. Both are designed to be culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and grounded in the realities of Black women. And the first one, our first solution, is a competency-based training model. It includes 5 structured modules that build skills progressively. And our second model focuses on immersive learning, and this is done through interactive case studies, role-play simulations, and narrative-based learning. So our design lab. So in order to refine the 2 models that I just mentioned, we conducted a design lab centered on co-creation. We brought together survivors, clinicians, advocates, and community leaders We used structured activities such as story circles, which helped participants shape and test both of the training concepts in a collaborative and culturally grounded environment. Next slide, please. So several key insights have emerged as a result of the design lab, including empathy as a central component, economic justice and tech safety as essential. We also learned that survivors prefer peer-driven content and that hybrid delivery increases accessibility. We also learned the importance of including child safety, co-parenting dynamics, and non-carceral options in training. Next slide, please. And here we wanted to highlight that this work is about shifting systems to better protect and support Black women. So by centering their voices and designing with the community, right, which is an important aspect. We design with the community, not for the community. We move closer to meaningful and sustainable change. And here, as we conclude, we want to share two of our design justice principles, and I'll just read what it says here. We center the voices of those who are directly impacted by the outcomes of the design process. And our last one is we see the role of the designer as a facilitator rather than an expert. Okay. So that concludes our time. We thank you and we welcome your questions at the end.
I clicked that instead of the unmute. So sorry. Thank you both so much. And you held it down beautifully for your team. And thank you for giving an insight on all the work that you've done. Sherry, I would love to pass it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sherry Jones, and I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your Saturday, which I'm sure is busy, to join us today. I am an MSW candidate at USC, born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, and currently residing in Houston, Texas. I have not arrived at social work through a straight line. I actually came from marketing, a 14+ year career. So that's the press releases, campaigns, measuring impact and clicks. And then grief found me, both professionally, personally, communally. And I realized that the most important work I would ever do couldn't be measured in metrics. It would be measured in my presence. I actually began co-facilitating grief support groups here in Houston at Bo's Place. And sitting across from families who had lost someone irreplaceable, I understood something I couldn't have learned in any boardroom, that bearing witness to pain is an act of justice, that showing up for communities that have historically been told to grieve quietly and move on, that is social work. Black communities in particular carry disproportionate grief from loss, from systemic trauma, from generations of unacknowledged pain. So in my presentation, I'm going to make the case for why we deserve research, practice, and policy that says our mourning matters too. That conviction is what drives my work and what I will carry into my future profession in social work. So in our short time together, we're just going to explore how culture, generational trauma, and systemic barriers shape Black grief. We're also going to talk about a little bit about my personal story, where the gaps in research are for Black communities, and how we all gathered here today can make a change in that research and expand the possibilities. So this story for me is not just theory or hearsay. It's actually part of my personal story. At 13, I lost my mother. By 30, I had lost my father and all of my grandparents. And that resulted in a diagnosis of prolonged grief disorder. And that disorder came not because of just, DSM or clinically attuned research, but it It came by a lack of culturally appropriate resources at my disposal. So just some of the cultural context of Black grief. And when I say Black grief, it's not that it's more performative or any different than grief by other communities. It's simply that we experience it differently because we have all of these layers that attribute to our grief. And so we have the generational trauma, systemic barriers, our faith and community traditions, racial grief and collective loss. These all contribute to barriers to the research concerning our grief. The first context of generational trauma, Black Americans carry grief that's not only personal, it's inherited. The trauma of enslavement, of Jim Crow, of redlining, of mass incarceration. These aren't just historical footnotes. They live in the body. They live in families. They shape how our grief is expressed, how it's suppressed, and how it moves through generations. So when a Black person loses a loved one, they're often grieving in the shadow of a much older history of loss. When it comes to faith and community traditions, in Black communities, the Black church historically has been the primary container for grief, where the homegoing celebrations take place, where the communal mourning takes place. The elders arrive with food, with prayer, with presence. These are not inferior substitutes for clinical care. They are sophisticated, time-tested, culturally embedded practices of care. And our profession has too often overlooked them, or worse, treated them as obstacles to real treatment. And third, we have systemic barriers. Access to grief support is not equal. Socioeconomic inequities limit access to therapy. The well-documented, well-earned distrust of healthcare systems keeps Black clients from seeking formal support. And the scarcity of culturally competent practitioners means that even when Black clients do show up in the office, they often encounter providers who don't have the understanding to meet them where they are. And fourth, racial grief. Wilson and O'Connor named this powerfully in their 2022 work, Black Americans grieve not only personal losses, but collective ones. The killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the names that the country learned and the names that it didn't. This is the grief that lands hard again and again, compounding onto personal loss in ways that mainstream grief frameworks have barely begun to address. These four forces don't operate in isolation. They interact, they compound, and they demand that we as practitioners show up differently. And so I just want to say something directly, and I say it with respect for people in the field and the people who built all the frameworks. Our existing grief frameworks are very valuable. I'm not here to dismiss diagnoses like prolonged grief disorder or the dual process model or continuing bonds theory. These are meaningful contributions, and I've used them to make sense of my own experience with loss, but they are incomplete. And the way they are incomplete has real measurable consequences for Black clients. On the left side of this slide, you see what the existing frameworks offer. They give us the language for complicated grief. They recognize that grief is not linear. They provide models for how people adapt to loss. And these are all important. Now we look at the critical gaps. These frameworks are largely developed through research that dramatically underrepresents Black communities. They do not account for intergenerational trauma. They have no real language for collective racial grief. They do not center faith or community as primary meaning-making structures. And here's perhaps the most consequential gap. They risk pathologizing expressions of grief that are actually culturally normative in the Black community. What does that look like in practice? When a Black client is still actively mourning a year after a loss, held by extended family, rooted in faith, grieving communally rather than in a therapist's office, that can look like prolonged grief disorder through one lens. But through a culturally informed lens, it may simply be how that person's community holds loss. If we pathologize that, we cause more harm than good. This is not theoretical, as I said in the beginning, because I've lived it. My own diagnosis emerged in part because the frameworks available to those around me were not built for someone in my context. Our theories need to expand. They don't need to be replaced, they need to be expanded. And that expansion requires intentional, targeted, community-centered research. And grief research isn't one size fits all. The statement on the left is not a slogan, it's a finding and it's a mandate. The dominant body of grief knowledge was built on studies that largely excluded Black experiences. They excluded Black voices and they excluded Black contexts. And when research excludes a community, practitioners trained on that research are ill-equipped to serve that community. The gap in knowledge becomes a gap in care. The gap in care becomes a disparity in outcomes. So what do we need? I see 3 urgent areas. We need research that centers Black participants, Black families, and the specific intersections of race, socioeconomic status, and loss. Not studies where Black respondents appear as a small demographic or a footnote, but studies where Black grief is the focus and it's the entire point. We need studies that examine how systemic racism and limited resources across the line contribute to complicated grief outcomes in Black communities. What does prolonged grief disorder really look like when it emerges from a context of racial terror, of poverty, and of earned distrust of providers? We don't know because we haven't studied it with the rigor that it demands. And we also need to develop and validate grief interventions that genuinely integrate what Black communities already use. Faith traditions, communal healing, storytelling, cultural identity, not adaptations of white normed models. Approaches built from the ground up in Black experience. If there are researchers in this Zoom room, and I believe there are, I'm speaking directly to you. This is your call, not a side project, as a central commitment. So we talked about what research needs to do, and now what can practitioners actually do starting now, not after the next training, not when the literature catches up or the research catches up, but now, because Black clients are grieving today. The first thing we can address is how we assess. When a Black client comes to us in grief, we have to ask different questions. Not only, how long have you been grieving? Or do you have intrusive thoughts? But who is your community? How does your family hold loss? What role does your faith play for you? What other losses, collective, historical, systemic, might be layering onto this one? And we have to hold our frameworks loosely enough to recognize when extended grieving timelines, communal mourning, and spiritual approaches to loss are culturally normative. Second, do not position yourself as the only support or the most legitimate one. Ask your client who is already holding them, the church elder, the neighbor who shows up with food, the family group chat. Position yourself as one thread in a larger web of care and honor what's already there. Third, we have to be willing to name racial grief in the room. If your client is in the middle of a personal loss, while another Black person has been killed by police, those griefs are not separate. You may need to say, I know you're carrying more than one kind of loss right now. I see that. We can hold room for both of those here. This is not outside the scope of grief work. This is the work. And fourth, this is a practice, not a credential. Seek consultation with colleagues who have lived experiences. Read the literature that is emerging. Advocate within your organizations for training and resources that reflect the clients you actually serve. Cultural humility is not a destination, it is a daily commitment. So before I move to closing, I just want to show you this slide where there are scholars who are doing the work. It is being done and it deserves to be honored and acknowledged. I believe you will be receiving copies of this slide deck so that you can have access to it later. So we're near the end of our time together, and so let's go back to what the work is really about. It's about compassion and understanding grief through a cultural lens. It's about action and reshaping research, clinical practice, and education to ensure that the grief of Black individuals is validated, studied, and supported with the depth and dignity it deserves. Those two words, compassion and action, they are not in tension. They require each other. Compassion without action is just feeling. It doesn't generate new research. It doesn't train the next generation of practitioners. It doesn't change the outcomes for Black clients who are grieving right now with inadequate support. And action without compassion risks becoming cold, mechanical, clinical, in the worst sense. We're not trying to solve a problem from the outside. We're trying to enter with humility and care into the most intimate human experiences there is. So here's the call. Research, design studies that center Black grief, not as a subgroup, as the subject. Education, weave cultural humility into every curriculum, into every supervision session, into every training program. Advocacy, examine the frameworks you used. Ask who they were built for. Commit to becoming the kind of practitioner that Black clients can trust with their grief. This is not extra work, it is the work. Thank you for listening today. Here again are just some resources. I want to empower you to dig on your own, to constantly be aware of things that are emerging. I genuinely just thank you for doing the work already that requires you to sit with loss for all of your clients professionally and repeatedly, because that can be heavy and it's not a small thing. Thank you for listening to my story today, for letting me tell you about the girl who lost her mother at 13 and the long journey that loss set in motion for me. I hope you leave today carrying something, maybe a question, maybe a critical reflection. This is a standard of care, and I hope we can really meet it together. And so before we completely close, this slide is my book, The Morning After Sunday, Grieving While Black. Everything I've shared with you today, from my personal story to the critique of frameworks to the call for more culturally responsive practice, this book is where all that lives in full. It's part memoir, part professional resource, and it was written for practitioners and researchers who work with grieving Black families and individuals. So the QR code is on the side, and in the chat, I will put my LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me, reach out, and together we can do the work of solving people's grief. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I really appreciate how tangible you made the work. Now, let me also get here. Oh, there we go. Okay, multitasking. Right, that the call-ins were rooted in like action now rather than a theoretical abstract. So thank you for that. All right, I guess I get to be the question asker. For the Powerhouse DSWs, I would love to know what aspects of Black women's experiences of protection and grief remain invisible within current research methods.
Wow. Quite a bit of it actually. As we were doing our research, we didn't find too much about the long-term effects of IPV on Black women and their families. There's a lack of research about things like how housing instability and uprooting an entire family. To Sherry's point, the grief that comes with that, because you're losing a relationship, you've probably lost, or they've lost familial ties, they've lost a job, they've lost this, they've lost that as a result of that intimate partner violence that they've experienced. So there's quite a bit of research gaps. And the current interventions that they have right now are very Eurocentric. And they don't necessarily address all of the needs of Black women who are experiencing intimate partner violence, especially if they have young children. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Carla, but
Well, something that I wanted to add, which applies to both IPV and grief, is the strong Black woman schema, right? So sometimes we'll show up in spaces and we're looking for resources, we're looking for help. And because of this schema, right? And it's double-sided, okay? Because there's good in it and there's bad in it also. But sometimes Black women will show up in these spaces and we may have a woman who has been abused. We may have a woman who is struggling with grief. But because Black women can sometimes show up as well put together, okay? Sometimes we are denied the services and the help that we need because it is assumed there's this assumption that we're strong and that we can handle it. And, a lot of times in systems, we are sent along our way, so to speak, without receiving the adequate help. So that is an aspect that I wanted to add here.
And to add to what both of these ladies said, even in general healthcare, Black people are denied services if we say we're in pain. Doctors second guess us. We don't get prescribed medications other clients would. There's stories on the news every day about us being denied just basic health care, and research and stories historically about how we have even been experimented on for the sake of the greater good. So you put all of this together, what all three of us have said, and I think there's a whole lot to unpack.
I love that, like that answered the question that I had for you as well, and then it hit right on time. Thank you three so much for really allowing us to dive deep in impacts and be introspective about how we can move forward. Now back to the screen share. Boop, boop. So without further ado, we're going to start off the final section of our time today with Jane.
Good morning.
You when you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. I'm James Tobacco. I'm honored to be here today among such amazing people. As a Marine veteran and a social worker, I've seen what happens when communication fails in high-stakes environments. This is the principle of tears. It is a clinical containment strategy for artificial intelligence, ensuring that when a human life depends on a screen, the technology doesn't become a secondary source of trauma. Currently, my patent-pending proprietary firmware focuses on a system and method for reducing computational strain in systems utilizing artificial intelligence. In simple terms, while I build structures for people in crisis, today, I'm showing you a structure for AI in crisis. So this is not a simulation. At 5:28 a.m. on March 17th, 2026, while running entirely offline in Los Angeles, this system received a simulated distress call from a user in Sudan. Stranded, no water, car dead. Because the brake was active, the AI didn't provide a helpful list of survival tips that would kill a 2% battery. It simply sent 6 words. Signal sent, location transmitted, help is coming. This occurred at the 899th minute of continuous autonomous operation. Now, these numbers are from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, and the World Food Program, WFP, situation report published in 2025. Nearly 2.3 million displaced are in Gaza, 25 million facing hunger in Sudan, 21.6 million needing aid in Yemen. And in all three contexts, mobile infrastructure is degraded or destroyed. But people are still reaching for AI through whatever connectivity remains. When they ask for help, what does the AI give them? Right now, 4 paragraphs when they need 1 sentence. That is the problem this research addresses. We talk about meeting people where they are in Gaza, Sudan, and Yemen. Where there are is a place where the grid is gone, but the need remains. People are reaching for AI because it's the only expert left. If we don't govern that interaction, we are leaving the most vulnerable populations to the mercy of unconstrained, battery-draining algorithms. So, imagine if you are in a blackout in Khartoum. Your phone is at 2%. You have 1 chance to send a signal for help. What if the AI you reach for waste that 2% battery by giving you a 200-word disclaimer instead of a 6-word confirmation? This research is for the person who doesn't have the luxury of unregulated AI. So this is how the signal travels when the world is dark. It is a 3-component pipeline. Starts off with offline AI detection, then an encrypted uplink. This is followed by a verified satellite relay. It mimics military rescue coordination systems, but it's also designed for civilian crisis and hardware at the edge. So in clinical practice, we call this a dysregulated interaction. When a user is in panic, they provide fragmented emotional input. Standard AI interprets that ambiguity as a signal to expand, generating walls of text that overwhelm the user. We are providing structure as containment. So how many of you have worked with a client who was so overwhelmed that they couldn't even tell you what they needed? So in social work, we provide the containment to help them regulate. So imagine if our AI tools did the same. Right now, AI is operating without a break, escalating the very fragmentation we are trying to heal. Structure changes everything. So the original question was, can structure make AI more accessible? And what we found was a physical law of computation. When you govern the interaction, the outputs don't get clearer. They get 84% to 98% smaller. No model change is required, only a change in how we talk to the machine. The data, precisely as it is found. The data is definitive. Across 1,000 automated trials, we saw a massive drop in token usage from an average of 104 tokens down to 16. Now imagine that. On offline models like Llama, the break still holds. We have proven that efficiency is a byproduct of governance. So this is not prompt engineering architecture. You cannot ask a model to be safe. You must architect it to be safe. So tier 1 is a suggestion, where tier 2 is inference governance. This is a structural constraint the model cannot override. That is the DeBacco Nexus standard. In my work with the courts, we know that instructions aren't enough. You need a framework. Well, tier 1 is a suggestion at the prompt level. Tier 2 is a governor at the systems level. This break is the framework. Now, the break performs better in languages that need it most. So here's what happens. The break performs best in languages that need it most, where we saw a 91.7 reduction in Arabic. Current AI safety is provincial and English-centric. This data proves that we can achieve linguistic equity by governing the interaction for the global south. But here's where it gets kind of crazy. I wasn't able to discover this by myself. If it wasn't for my wife, Dr. Kim Dworak-Peck, who's an expert in languages, I would not have realized that you need to look through the languages from right to left rather than just left to right. So the break finds its architecture. Self-governance fails. When we tell an AI to monitor itself, it expands. But when we separate the governor from the responder, we achieve a 67% reduction with 10 out of 10 reliability. Structural separation is what makes the break fire. The Govern Universal 911. I tested this in English, Arabic, Farsi, Mandarin, French, Swahili. 6 out of 6 confirmed. 62% average reduction at 2% battery. Every run ended. Signal sent, location transmitted, help is coming. No dispatcher, no operator, no tower required. The break makes it safe enough to be the first. This is not AI assisting emergency response. What this is AI being the emergency response. So look at this timestamp. 910 minutes of uptime. I initialized the system. I went to sleep, and the governance held for over 15 hours. The HMAC, which is the hash-based message authentication code, and the proof that the message wasn't tampered with, and the ED 25519, the digital signature and proof who sent it, remained active, rejecting forged packets. This is reductions practice. This didn't run on a server farm. It ran all night on a single iMac in Los Angeles. It didn't crash because it was built for the edge, where there is no IT support and no second chances. So this is the law, the DeBacco rule. Governed AI inference must produce a response within an energy envelope of 1.0 joule or less. We have codified safety into the energy budget itself. If the brake is on, the battery lives. But what if the 1.0 joule was the maximum tax a human had to pay for help? That's the DeBacco rule. It's the digital right to a sustainable interaction. 8 things, one night, all offline. And one night, entirely offline, we built a reproducible runtime, a satellite relay, and a signed cryptographic packet system. We were able to prove that help still comes when the primary network fails. This is that proof. On March 17, 2026 at 5:28 a.m., this ran all night for 910 minutes, all offline. This is the break. As you look at this terminal, there you could see the scrolling. You are seeing the system at its 910th minute mark. The DeBacco rule active flag. This is what safety looks like at the edge: autonomous, offline, and cryptographically verified. Now, the same brake that saves a life in Sudan could save the planet. If we reduce the computational demand of every AI interaction by 80%, we aren't just saving batteries, we are reducing the carbon footprint of the digital age. So what if the very brake that saves a life in Sudan is also the brake that saves our planet? Imagine if we could tax the waste of the powerful to fund the survival of the powerless. This isn't just code, it's a standard of care. If we know a 1.0 Joule solution exists, how many of us are willing to remain silent while the industry ignores it? AI plus UI equals TES. This equation is the entire argument in 4 characters. Artificial intelligence plus user intentionality equals total energy saved. It is not symbolic, it is mathematical. When the machine is governed and the human is intentional, the waste disappears, not reduced, not offset, eliminated at the point of generation. That is what this research proves. The brake on the AI side, the intentionality on the human side, together they produce a system that does more with less and leaves the planet better than it found it. That is the social work mandate applied to the most consequential technology of our time. This is why social workers should be leading this conversation. We have been building governance into human systems for hundreds of years. We know that the most durable change is structural. We know that accountability must be built into the architecture, not pasted on top of it. And we know that the most vulnerable populations deserve systems designed for them, not systems that happen to reach them last. So I've spent 30 years in a system of total containment, and I now spend my days in LA County courts advocating for the veterans who are often at their breaking point. I've learned to ask, what if the system worked for us instead of just on us? AI is universal. Its safety is currently provincial. We save 15 hours of uptime and 91% of tokens by governing the interaction. It's time social work took the wheel. AI plus UI equals TES. That is not just a formula. That is a future. I'm James Tobacco. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate it. And I know that you got again, so many accolades today, or like congratulations, that since even sending me this slide, you actually got word back that it's no longer patent pending, that it is officially patented. So I wanted to give you this before we move to the next. And so on the direction of ethics and AI, I'm going to pass it over to Stephen. There you are. Okay, couldn't hear you for a second. I can hear you
now. All right. Yeah, thank you, Pixie and Devin, for putting this all together, and thank you for all the wonderful attendees and presenters. Yes, I'm Stephen Lieberman. I've been working with AI since like 1999, designing neural networks, and professionally since about 2008, I think. So I've been doing this stuff for a long time, through the AI winter, when, long before everybody was talking about it. And I've also been involved with nonprofits for also about 15 years, mostly doing work at the intersection of community organizing, tech, digital divide, and workforce development. And my work now, especially through USC, focuses on ethical AI and AI safety, and why social workers are so important, what we need to do to protect our future. And that's what this presentation is about. This is a small part of a much larger piece of work. We're not going to cover everything. We're going to scratch the surface, but please feel free to reach out to me, or you can go to the website to get more information. So yeah, next slide. Let's start. The one thing that I want to impress upon everyone, really the only thing, if you take away any one thing from this, is that you are the experts. You are the ethical experts. The AI systems are not, and they will not be for the foreseeable future. What that means is that we are in charge of the algorithmic advocacy, that is, using our ethical expertise to make sure that these powerful systems that are very, very capable are aimed towards social justice and aligned with human values. Next slide. The way to conceptualize this is partly using something that we are already familiar with, which is that the person and environment is a complex system. Things happen, small changes can have ripple effects and lead to major trends or benefits down the road. We are all experienced in working with these emergent factors in the real world, with human systems, with communities, with individuals and family systems. We know that's a complex system. AIs, the modern LLMs that people use as ChatGPT, Claude, any of those are also complex systems in a different way. They're trained basically on everything on the internet, with billions of parameters that are all meshed together to give you an impression of an expert, an impression of language. They're large language models. So where the point of advocacy, like where we come in, is bridging the complex system that is modern frontier AI with the complex system that is the real world, people in the environment, people in communities. Next slide. You are the expert. That's really everything that I want to say here. Next slide. The way that these systems are created is that they just hoover up all the information on the internet and then some, right? Which means that within these systems that constitute the AI, they just bring forward all of the bias and all of the historical inaccuracies that are found in the original internet trove of trillions of documents. And during the training of these models, so after all that information is sucked up into the model as background, they're trained by people for the most part. And one of the things that happens during this training process is that in order for these models to give the most correct answers, correct, to the most number of people, marginalized communities, marginalized voices are stripped out. They're stripped out during the training process. So while the original data can have these voices and these perspectives, most of it never actually makes it into the final product that we are using. These are statistical probability machines, right? These LLMs, they have no concept of truth. They don't know what's true. They don't know what's false. What they're doing is they're looking at what is the most likely next token, which is usually, you can think of it as a word, that what is the most likely next token based on all of the information that they've sucked up from the internet, and then how they've been trained by humans for the most part. Next slide. So, well, the main thing we're going to talk about today, and I'm just going to give you, I think, 5 examples out of, there's about 20 is what I call this audit and advocacy. And these are prompts. These are prompts that you, as the ethical expert, can use with any of these LLMs to help. And I want to be very, very clear about what these do and what they don't do. All right. What entering information into an LLM prompt does is it adds context. These LLMs do something called in-context learning, which means that they take the totality of the context that they're given, which includes their kind of base prompt that come from the company. It includes your original questions. It includes the audit and advocacy prompts I'm going to show you now. And it can include any other kind of documents or background information that you give it. But that's what it does, right? So these prompts, they provide context. They're easy to use tools. They can bring patterns of bias to the surface so that you can be aware of them as an ethical expert. They can help build AI literacy, and they can also really help to tease out important information for forming institutional organizational policies around AI use. Here's what they do not do. All right. They do not get the AI to tell the truth. AIs don't know what the truth is. They cannot guarantee the accuracy of any outputs. They don't change the underlying training of the model. They definitely don't substitute for independent verification. And they're not a replacement for the hard work and systemic advocacy and institutional accountability that we need to do as professionals over the next 10 years. So, yes. So the first one we're going to look at is if you've used LLMs, you know that they try to make you happy, right? They will tell you you're the most brilliant person in the world. Everything you're doing is absolutely correct and phenomenal. It's sycophancy. And this is a direct result of human beings training the system to say, I like this response, I don't like that response. Well, that means that they're not critical of your input, which means that you've got to tell them, right? You've got to add that context to say, you know what, it is okay for you to disagree with me. Don't just be helpful, be useful. Next slide. And again, you can, I'll send these out to anybody who wants to look at them. So like I was saying before, they have a tendency to erase the structural context of their responses as a factor of how these models are trained and what they're attuned to do. So it is very, very worthwhile to audit what's missing. And I said, like, list the structural, economic, and legislative barriers that you have omitted. That can get it to go try to tease out those things from the training data. And if you prompt it specifically to try to look at living web documents, you can get it to update sometimes. But you need to mandate that structural lens. It will not do it automatically, right? So, and then, of course, you are the expert. These are all just suggestions, right? These prompts, you do not have to use them verbatim. These are just to help get you thinking about how to tease out the auditing and how to start doing the advocacy. So always think about the actual systems and your actual questions, and tune these to what you need. So I mean, you don't just need to say apply a systems theory lens. Tell it exactly what kind of lens you want to apply. What system thinking lens? Next. This is one of this surveillance bias is one of the biggest concerns. It's been voiced early and often, and it is still very important. All of the historical records, as we all know, have the very real effect of taking biases that exist in the historical record and just propagating them forward. And so you look at arrest records and criminalization records, CS records, things like that. mostly what is useful is to surface these as much as possible. Say, what data are you relying on, right? Bring it to the front. It will not tell you. These LLMs will not tell you really, unless you just ask that explicitly. And you can ask it to. You can add context for a recalibration, but you do have to be specific about what exactly you want, right? Next. Weird bias. This is one of my favorite topics. Weird. So this is, what is the internet and who gets to train these models? Well, almost all of that information is this Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic information. Those are the people that have, for the most part, written the internet, and those are the people that have, for the most part, trained the models. So this is baked in. It's baked in at the deepest levels of what these LLMs do, how they process information, and this is the statistical basis for their replies. So if you are talking about any population that is not this weird population, it has to be made explicit. And the weird biases have to be audited explicitly in these systems. So, this is perhaps one of the most useful, most urgent things to do, because it does get at the very core of how these systems are designed and put together. Next. So you can use these audit prompts to help tease out how the model is reasoning and what data it has and what data it doesn't have. Use the advocacy prompts to help provide context that can kind of reframe things and shift it more towards being in line with what you need as a social worker, as the ethical expert. Also, you can add context, what I was saying before, too, you can add context that persists between your sessions. This is like the personalized information, the background information. And, I advise everybody, add the explicit links and language to the code of ethics, to the regulations that you need to, abide by in your institution, or, according to your professional licensure. Put it all in there. And then do audit prompts to make sure it kind of understands what you want to get from it. Again, this is no guarantee that these things will be used consistently. Not if you're using commercial LLMs. You can design things yourself and run them locally, where you can basically more or less kind of guarantee that these things are going to be referenced explicitly. And I do encourage everybody to do that. But I just wanted to say, there's an intervention point, right? Use the prompts, give it knowledge to begin with that persists across sessions, and then it is our responsibility as the ethical experts and as the people that are doing the work with real humans, and the real humans in the real communities that the algorithms impact. We are the people that need to lead the institutional change. We are very much in the position, more than any other field, more than any other group of experts, that will understand how these algorithms affect real people in the real world. Yeah. You are the final barrier. So please, I'm going to have about 20 of these audit and advocacy prompts available. You can get more information at 1023.ai. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate it, and making it so understandable of what can you do with what you have access to, and uplifting the lens in which we come through it. I'm going to take a pause really quick, you all. We're trying to get one of our last presenters into the room. So take a breather, and then we will move on to our last session.
Pixie, do you see Brian? I don't even see Brian inside at all in the room itself.
I don't. I was going to do the invite. I was going to invite real quick, see if I can get it to go.
Is it Sharon? Is that how you pronounce the name?
Sharon.
Oh, Sharon, I apologize. Sharon, do you have their email? Because I don't even see them. They're not even in the room, I don't see.
Oops.
I'm looking at the panelists as well as the attendees and
I'm
what I
sending
see.
it now. Again.
Have they ever logged into Zoom before using that email by any chance? Do you know, Sharon?
Yeah, I would assume so. It might show up as co-learning lab.
Let me see. Let me go to the actual invitations. It's loading, of course.
I just sent the whole big invite from the meeting to that email, so hopefully you can get that and then get it.
Yeah, no worries. There's definitely something on their end. I mean, I'm prepared either way, so obviously they're just super important to the work, but I can present it.
Okay. I just added them as a panelist. Can you help them check their email for me to see if that solves our issue? I'm going to resend it as well, just in case.
Thanks for hanging in there with us, you all.
All right, I'm not having luck, so I don't want to hold this up. I know we've been here.
All right, well then, whenever you're ready, and if he is able to pop in, then we can let him start chatting as well. Off to you for our last and final session.
Well, thank you so much for being here. My name is Sharon Alkins. I'm a doctoral student at USC School of Social Work and former school counselor and principal and founder of Counseling Concierge. And my co-designer in this work is Brian Wallace, who's also an educator and founder of Collabs, and he is a second-year doctoral student at Georgia Tech School of Interactive Computing. And so we call this work Democratizing the Hustle, Equitable AI Tech Integration in an Alternative High School Entrepreneurship Curriculum. So this is a practitioner reflection on what we built, what we saw, and what we are still learning. So what did we build, or we prefer to say co-design? A 6-week paid credit-bearing entrepreneurship program where alternative high school students used AI as a tool to design, launch, and pitch real business ideas grounded in their community. Before we introduced any AI tools, one crucial element was already present in the space, which was trust. So students felt encouraged to experiment, take risks, and fully engage. And so while we were indeed introducing new technology, the more significant factor was the environment, which communicated you belong here and your knowledge is valuable. We started with a very sobering reality. 75% of innovators report facing barriers to access that limit their ability to contribute to industry shaping ideas. So we often talk about broadening participation, but we have to ask what shifts when youth who have been pushed out of traditional systems are positioned as contributors to innovation. And we talk about contributors to innovation rather than just recipients of remediation. And so our framing is grounded in design justice and culturally sustaining pedagogy. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the school that we supported in this program serves students ages 16 to 22. These are young people navigating employment, caregiving, and housing instability, often all three at once. The school operates on a competency-based model, flexible model, because traditional structures did not work for these particular students. And that's not a deficit. And I want to say that again, that was not a deficit. This is a design problem on part of the system. So summer is typically framed as lost time or remediation. For this all-ed high school, summer school is reframed as the fifth quarter, which is a formal academic extension that was credit-bearing, paid, and community anchored from the start. So students earned a living wage, $15 if they were under 18 and $20 if they were 19 or older per hour. Also, transportation was arranged. So these were not considered incentives. These were infrastructure. Access for the students was material. Justice was logistical. If we wanted our students to show up, we had to design systems that made showing up possible. So bear with me, this is a shared slide. So we structured the program across three distinct phases: discovery, development, and implementation. So phase one was a 16-hour AI entrepreneurship intensive where we introduced high status tech as a low friction entry point. Phase two was a paid credit-bearing academic session designed to provide academic legitimacy alongside financial stability, removing barriers to participation. In phase three was for students seeking a workforce pathway. We offered optional subsidized employment through Rise and Thrive Refreshments, a real-world concession stand at Houghton's Pond. So this living wage, it was a living wage as well as an employment opportunity. And this provided students with that workforce pathway and opportunity to make money. Next slide, thank you. All right, bear with me again. This is the computer science part. So this is the core of our human-centered computing contribution. So we positioned AI, specifically Gemini, as a co-pilot, not to be confused with Microsoft. And this was not a replacement for human thought. So students maintained editorial authority here. We taught prompt engineering through our four-part framework: context, tasks, constraints, and format. Students moved quickly from vague queries to multi-constraint instructions. So for example, when Gemini suggested a very much like artisanal branding, like very fancy, the students completely rejected it for neighborhood authentic language. They're like, this is us, that's not it. So in this model, students directed the strategy and the creative decisions, while the AI executed the formal language and financial modeling. So this is technical agency in action. Next slide. Okay, from the outset, our goal was a truly student-led experience. Before a single AI tool entered the room, we prioritized youth agency. We did this by removing structural barriers and creating a space where students' cultural knowledge was not just welcomed, but centered as the primary asset of all of the work. Once that foundation of trust was built, we provided access to resources. Students used Google Gemini as not as a teacher, but as like a technical consultant to break down complex business data and some of the ideas. This allowed them to act as curators, maintaining a full editorial authority over the brand's entire voice. And this allowed them to move from theory to practice. So we created an applied, authentic learning experience, the Smoothie Startup Challenge, and students were tasked with designing a new product for the Rise and Thrive concession stand. This required them to conduct market research to understand their specific demographic, apply computational thinking to calculate cost of goods and sustainable price points, translate their neighborhood authentic language to a viable marketing plan. We wrapped this in culturally sustaining pedagogy. We didn't just give them, right, the expectations, we gave them the scaffolds and the trust to meet them. So the arc we're talking about here culminated in professional pitch, where students synthesized their data, their demographics, cost, and the creative vision. They presented it to both staff, the community, and their peers. But the most critical piece was the implementation. It was getting it off the ground and getting it running. So we close that loop by putting the winning student design product on the actual summer menu and seeing their work come to fruition in this real world, authentic learning space, transform their identity from passive students to active owners and innovators. And I'm going to pause for 1 second. Brian says he's in the room. If you can pull him up.
Let's see.
Does Brian have a different name? Because I'm not seeing. Pixie, do you see
Pulling up his
Brian?
collabs.
No, there's not. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
Okay.
Sorry
I was
about
like, yeah.
that.
He's like, he's messaging me. He's like, I'm here. That's all right. Oh, good. Okay, so we are. Yep, that's perfect slide. Thank you so much. All right,
Okay.
here we are. So from the outset, nope, that's not where I am. So what shifted, right? So this is what we're talking about, what we're thinking about. So what shifted? The results were honestly striking for us. So we saw 100% student retention and 95% attendance during the intensive. So that when you think about that, we talked about that as phase one. But the most important shift for these students, for the kiddos, wasn't the technological piece. It was positional. We saw students move from deficit self-talk to a language of ownership. We validated what Yoso calls navigational capital, and these are the skills the students already possessed to navigate complex systems. Next slide, thank you. All right, so what happened? The outcomes are grounded in student voice. Initially, students said, I'm not good at business. But by the end, they were saying, this is our product. One student with the initials JHS noted that being paid to learn signaled their thoughts were actually worth something. That is the intersection of economic self-concept and academic legitimacy. So we want to name some tensions in this work. This is the practitioner reflection. So this is a practitioner reflection, and it is not an IRB study. That gives us depth and proximity to the work, and it limits what we can claim. We worked with a small cohort of 22 students. 12 provided aggregated feedback. 3 of the 5 supporting staff contributed reflection. That gives us insight, and it is not comprehensive. We are also insiders. We co-designed and we're facilitators. So while that gives us context, it introduces some bias. So I want to be clear that we are not offering causal findings or generalizable outcomes. What we're offering is a case grounded, transparent, and open to some critique. All right, so although we saw some desired outcomes, we still have questions. So did the prompt engineering skills persist? Would this work without the pay? We also missed opportunities to examine family context or conduct in a longitudinal follow-up study. So we did have year one data, which was our data which data was primarily qualitative. And we needed more comparison conditions moving forward. And so we wanted to think about that. And the photos that you see here, the top one you see is a student in practice actually executing the work at the pond at the concession stand. The middle photo is some teamwork and building trust with the students in a design challenge. And the third one is an argument. It is the students discussing the name or the type of smoothie that they wanted to use and coming up with their brand and name. So that was the work in real time with students. So what does this mean for social work and for the practitioners, field instructors, and educators in the room? What we designed for was intersectionality through opportunity and innovation. So for practitioners, co-design with youth, not just for them, compensate participation, use technology as a tool for voice and agency, and choose paid programs over unpaid enrichment every time structural conditions allow. For field instructors, if we want graduates who can design ethical youth-centered systems, we need placements where they practice exactly that: decision-making authority, critical technology engagement, connection to core competencies around rights, justice, and difference. And for researchers and educators, this is about what we name and what we study. It reflects who innovation has been designed for through practitioner inquiry and through scholarship. All right, bear with me. So this is the human-centered computing slide. All right, let's see. So for the human-centered computing and computer science education community, 3 concepts anchor this work. Computational thinking, the ability to decompose problems, iterate on solutions, and evaluate output. Prompt engineering as the vehicle. Technical agency as the outcome. Students directed and AI executed, and it was not reversed. What this case offers to computer science education is a proof point that alternative school students engage deeply with AI literacy when the instruction is culturally grounded, the problems are authentic, and the barriers, which were financial, logistical, and relational, were removed. The field has largely overlooked this population, and this is a missed opportunity for computing and not just for social work. We need to broaden the settings we study to include these alternative environments. So 4 commitments held this work together. So at its core, this work isn't about teaching AI. It was about interrupting the gatekeeping of innovation. So it was 1 program, 1 placement, and 1 policy at a time. So that's the thinking that we have moving forward. We leave you with 4 commitments. 1, remove structural barriers. Pay is infrastructure. 2, center youth dignity. Trust them as architects. And 3, use technology ethically. We want to amplify the student agency. And number 4, design systems that do not harm by interrupting gatekeeping. So to recap the Q5 model, we move from remediation to ownership by pairing high expectations with high support. We foster soft skills or essential skills like leadership and confidence. As one student said, I realize I am capable of putting myself out there. So in the chat, we'd like you to let us know, are our systems designed to trust young people or just manage them? So I want to see that answer in the chat. That question is yours to take with you. We'd love to hear how that sits with you. What is it raising for your practice, your placements, or your research? Sorry, Pixie, I went to the last slide and then went backwards. We also invite you to reach out and connect with us. I can drop our emails and LinkedIn's in the chat. And then go back to the last slide. Thanks, Pixie. The Q&A slide. So we'll close with this. Youth who are trusted by the systems designed to serve them will not only access innovation, they will lead it. So I want to give a special thanks and shout out to our partners who made this work possible, Rise and Thrive Refreshments for providing a real context with real stakes, the Q5 program faculty, Yesenia Aguilar, Joe Kane, Nick Jones, for their commitment to making the 5th quarter viable, and to every single one of our students who showed up on day 1 and stayed. And I can't wait to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry for messing up some of the slides, but
that was
I
all
think
me.
you.
We swapped it again. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think you did beautifully, and it's also for me, like, I love seeing kind of how this wrapped up the day of like taking something so technological and then again rooting it back into community and how that applies, and that it ends with young people. That also might be my preferred intersection. So without further ado, our last Q&A, I will do the usual stop screen share. And let's see. I think I just saw commentary in the chat. So, and if something else comes up, I will look. But let's start with James. If accountability becomes technologically mediated, what risks arise around who defines harm and who has the authority to repair it?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I would have to say that, like, under the principle of tiers, accountability is not really delegated to the technology. It is governed by it. So the debacle rule establishes that human-authored governance structurally outperforms autonomous AI-generated governance. That's basically the tier 4 in the debacle nexus rule. The human defines the harm. So the human authors the constraint. The technology executes within that boundary. Well, that would mean to me that the authority to repair never leaves the human. So the governance layer ensures that it cannot.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. And I appreciate the clarity. Stephen, how can uncertainty and unpredictability be ethically managed in systems that increasingly shape social welfare outcomes?
Situation. I think the best way to approach it is as systems experts, as human systems experts first, and trying to get a good understanding of where these technologies impact human systems, how they impact human systems, and where we can mediate those interactions in an immediate sense, and then in the development in the further development of technological systems. And it's not just AI, right? I mean, this is for all technological systems, right? But yeah, I think, you know, barring any magic, that's our best approach.
Well, we need the magic.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then Sharon, how might reliance on AI mediated belonging or learning environments alter young people's expectation of human relationships?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So my first thinking is that we have to first understand AI through the lens of literacy. So we have to be able to think, speak, comprehend, have like a full like critical analysis of what it is, so we then understand how to use it. And so when we think about the way that young people will then further engage and move the work forward, we have to also think about the way that they understand. And what I'm noticing is that a lot of the students don't even understand what a large language model is in the back end, right? That it's like a curated system. It's not your friend, it's not your teacher, it's just a system that pulls information from all these other places and then gives it to you. So without their ability to like make meaning and make sense of it, then I think we can't even move into that part of the conversation until we talk about it from the structural part, the baseline part, so students actually know what they're engaging with.
Yes, yes, I love it. I appreciate that in the sense of like I think often when being instructed to think about when presenting or putting information out there that you have to think about like third to sixth grade reading level, right? And I think that also comes with like thinking acronyms or definitions of things. But then now, right, with technology being so expansive in its open usage, like how can we ground and make tangible this thing that seems like something else? So I really appreciate the way that you approached it. Thank you all three for hanging in there throughout the day and really helping us close out with some really thoughtful and like again leading into the future of how we can continually ground in humanity the ethics and accountability within social work, but then also not get left behind. So thank you all. I will do one more share while I close us all out for today. And I was just thinking, I wanted you to invite you just to reflect on one question. And I appreciate you all from like one letting us know you couldn't interact before, or you know, and then just you know, sending your appreciation to the presenters today. But I would love to know, like, kind of, yeah, what sparked your curiosity or energy today in a way that you didn't expect? And I come at that from the place of like this. Like sometimes we have implicit expectations. We talk about implicit bias, but those expectations in which we show up, and maybe something surprised us today. I hope that you all feel energized to continue the conversations beyond the symposium and that we collectively created the future of social work together and maybe even spark some further conversation. if you, as you were here and you registered, you will receive the link and the recording to this, and it also will be publicly available shortly. So thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. So be well.